Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The
People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Nigel Farage, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Friday, the 24th of May. I'm Emily Carver.
And I am Emily Carver. You're teasing me.
I'm not teasing. We got it wrong yesterday. I just thought we'd keep up with the theme.
I'm still Emily Carver. Anyway, the gloves are off. Rishi Sunak challenges Keir Starmer to 6 television debates, claiming the Labour leader does not have the courage to face him. But the question is, do pre-rehearsed TV debates still serve a purpose anyway?
Jeremy Corbyn is expelled from the Labour Party as the ex-leader announces he'll stand as an independent candidate. But after 40 years representing Islington North, could he win without the red rosette?
And locals rally outside a North London cinema after it was vandalised by suspected pro-Palestine activists. The cinema was due to screen a documentary about the horrors of October the 7th. We'll speak to one man who stood up to the anti-Israel mob.
And killing our spirits. As pubs gear up for the FA Cup final tomorrow, drinkers are being urged to demand top-ups at the bar to avoid being shortchanged.
And get this, I'm not sure if you've seen the news, it's breaking in the last few moments, that the Boris Johnson ally, David Frost, has been banned from standing as a Tory candidate at the general election. What's all this about?
Well, he was Boris Johnson's main Brexit advisor. First worked for Boris in the Foreign Office, was brought into number 10. When Boris became Prime Minister, he did all the work of trying to unpick what Theresa May had negotiated and get something that looked a bit more like a full-fat Brexit through the line. He then was ennobled, became a member of the House of Lords, but has been very critical of the direction of the government under Rishi Sunak. And there's been a lot of speculation that some of the polls that we saw, that the Telegraph reported, that had comment alongside from Lord Frost, might well have been part of an operation to get Rishi out. So it seems that this might be payback from Rishi, saying that David Frost can't stand as an MP in this election because there's much speculation that David Frost was working, even though he said he's not doing that anymore, but was working to get Rishi Sunak out of number 10.
I mean, he does stick the boot in quite often, doesn't he? He writes many columns for the Telegraph newspaper, slamming government policy and the like. So, you know.
But I think perhaps what the House of Commons needs is more independent-minded, principled people, not going to stick to the party line at every single opportunity. They're going to say what they think. Well, do you know what? I mean, when Blair was in power and Corbyn was on the backbenches of the Labour Party, occasionally, you know, hitting out at the only... That wasn't such a bad thing.
Well, there you go. What do you make of that? Boris Johnson, key ally, banned from standing by Rishi Sunak. Well, gbnews.com/your say. Get in touch on everything we're talking about. But let's get the headlines with Aaron.
It's 3 minutes past 12. Good afternoon to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong. The Prime Minister says the lowering of the price cap shows his plan is working as both parties look to make energy policy an electoral dividing line. Speaking in Belfast as part of his whistle-stop tour of the UK, Rishi Sunak says the economy has turned a corner and he'll be telling voters over the next few weeks how the Conservatives plan to secure Britain's future.
Inflation has fallen back to normal levels. The economy grew faster than all our competitors at the beginning of this year. Today we've had the news that energy bills are falling again and wages have been rising faster than prices for almost a year now. And that's why it's the right time to turn to the future. And the world is sadly a more uncertain place than it's been in decades. And that's why what the country needs is leadership that can provide bold action and that has a clear plan, because that's how we will deliver a secure future for everyone in our country.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer says only Labour can stop the chaos and turn the page as he outlined plans to cut bills and boost energy security. The Labour leader is campaigning in Scotland today, where he's pledged to bring down costs with a new publicly owned green power company. Labour, which has just 2 MPs in Scotland, is hoping to make electoral gains there after years of dominance by the SNP. Sir Keir says now is the time for change.
And whether you're a family that's been struggling with the cost of living for grindless month after month after month, whether you're a business that's been struggling against the odds for a very, very long time now, or serving your communities, this is for you, because this is an election about change. And Scotland's voice is vital.
Jeremy Corbyn's confirmed he'll stand as an independent candidate in the general election against the party he once led. As a result, he's automatically been expelled as a member of Labour, which suspended him in 2020 over complaints of anti-Semitism in the party had been, in his words, dramatically overstated for political reasons. The former Labour leader says he'll run as a voice for equality, democracy and peace in Islington North, which he's represented since 1983.
I believe in democracy. I want our political parties to be democratic. But members of Islington North Labour have been denied the right to choose their own candidate. And alongside that, the community as a whole has been disempowered because of that. So we have to stand up. We have to stand up and say, we're not taking this anymore. We will assert our rights.
The number of people sleeping rough has doubled since 2010, despite the Conservative Party's promise to solve the crisis. The government published a strategy to tackle the growing problem 2 years ago, which was restating its manifesto commitments from the last general election. But figures show there were nearly 4,000 people sleeping rough across England on a single night in February last year. That's more than twice the recorded figure from 2010, when the Conservatives came to power. Housing organisation Shelter says homelessness is a political choice and called on MPs to do more to tackle it. The former boss of the Post Office has admitted she made mistakes in her handling of the Horizon scandal and says there's no one else to blame. Giving evidence for a third day at the Post Office inquiry in London, Paula Venables became emotional as she admitted she hadn't recognised the imbalance of power between the institution and the individual. She said she had to rely on colleagues who were experts and had no reason not to take their advice. But Ms Venables denied accusations she led the Post Office through deception. 4 people have been killed and at least 17 injured after a building collapsed on the Spanish island of Mallorca. A 2-storey restaurant collapsed on the beach in Palma de Mallorca, a popular tourism hotspot in the Balearic Islands. They were taken to a number of hospitals across the island. Emergency crews say they're finalising search and rescue operations and are securing the area. And more than 2/3 of beer and wine served in British pubs and bars are being short-measured. A new survey from the Trading Standards found 77 bars and pubs were serving around 70% less than the prescribed quantity required. For the average beer drinker, it equates to the loss of £1.70 every week, and the average wine drinker is £2.20 worse off each week. The survey comes as the cost of a pint and other drinks hits all-time highs. Well, for the latest on all of our stories, you can get GB News alerts, scan the QR code on your screen. The details are also on our website, gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Tom and Emily.
Right, well, it's 12:08. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain. Now, as the general election campaign really kicks off, the Tories have slammed Sir Keir Starmer, accusing him of being spineless over his apparent decision to decline weekly head-to-head televised debates with the Prime Minister in the weeks leading up to the poll.
Yeah, the Labour leader responded by saying his priority is to be out on the road hearing from voters, committed to 2 TV debates he committed to prior to election date on July the 4th. Why these television debates couldn't be on the road, I'm not quite sure, but...
they're better when they're on the road, even.
Yes, I mean, anyway, let's speak to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. I suppose it makes sense, always is the case in elections. The guy who's out ahead doesn't want the debates. The person who's behind does want the debates. 'Twas ever thus.
Well, exactly. We saw the same thing in 2019 when Boris Johnson was so far ahead in the polls and he did not want to join in with these election debates. Keir Starmer has said that he will do 2 TV debates, which is pretty standard, but Rishi Sunak has upped the ante, saying he'd like to do 6 TV debates. Now, it's quite an interesting move from Rishi Sunak here. His personal popularity ratings are quite low, actually very low indeed, lower than Boris Johnson when he left office or Margaret Thatcher when she left office, but he seems to be turning this into quite a presidential debate. He wants to make it less about the Conservative vote versus Labour and more about Rishi Sunak versus Keir Starmer. Now, with low popularity ratings, that might seem a little bit odd, but it is true to say that actually Keir Starmer's personal ratings are lower than the Labour Party's, so perhaps it's a sensible strategy. As for what Rishi Sunak wants to make these TV debates about, it seems to be the economy and immigration. Well, on the economy, it's a pretty mixed bag in terms of Sunak's record. He's managed to halve inflation. He's actually done a lot more than that. It's now down at 2.3%. But whether that's down to him is a matter for economists to debate. But GDP per capita is not very impressive at all, which means that he's failed, really, in his pledge to get growth going. And I think that's something that Keir Starmer will pick him up on. As for immigration, well, he definitely hasn't managed to stop the boats. The Rwanda plan isn't even off the ground yet. But that said, it sounds from our GB News poll today as though people don't really trust either party on immigration. So perhaps this is Sunak's chance to get ahead a little bit. He's probably not going to get his 6 debates. Keir Starmer did an interview this morning on a radio programme and didn't do particularly well. He sort of floundered on questions where he should have had set answers, like Natalie Elphicke joining the party. Rishi Sunak probably thinks that he has the edge when it comes to media debates. But he's got a long, long way to go if he wants to make a dent in that 20-point majority. And I don't think even 6 debates would do it.
Well, of course, the invitation is very much open for Sir Keir Starmer to take part in a GB News People's Forum. That's certainly the case. So that's a little invitation again from Good Afternoon Britain. But let's be frank, this is going to be Britain's most boring political TV debate series, if there is 6. Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, they don't set the world alight necessarily when it comes to that debate and that charisma. I
think that is a fair enough assessment, Emily. I'm not even sure I would want to watch 6 election debates between Rishi Sunak.
Are there
Rishi
enough
Sunak
channels,
and Keir
Olivia?
Starmer, and it's very much my job. Well, that's a very good question. I wonder how far Rishi Sunak is going to push Starmer on this. I mean, I remember looking back to the leadership contest of 2022 between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. Sunak wanted to do lots of debates. He's always very prepared for these things. He has all his documents in front of him. Everything is colour-coded and ready to go. He's always apparently the first into the office, the last out in the evenings. He knows what he's doing. But actually, he didn't come across too well in those debates. He people thought he was being a bit patronising to Liz Truss, sort of laughing at her, talking her down. And lots of people say that's why he ended up losing that leadership election. So he has a lot of confidence in these TV debates.
We've started to hear Rishi Sunak say something that perhaps would poll well if he had said this from the start of his premiership, which is that during those TV debates with Liz Truss, he said, Liz, if you go as fast and as far as you're saying you're going to do, if you cut taxes at a time of high inflation, this is what will happen. 1, 2, 3. I mean, yeah, he seemed patronising and he seemed smarmy. But I suppose
he was right.
To anyone watching, they might think, hang on, maybe he had a point.
Well, I think there is a very good argument that Rishi Sunak has probably been vindicated by history since 2022. But unfortunately for him, elections, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. Optics is so important. And his tone in those debates just seemed to strike the wrong note for so many people. I wonder what it's going to be like against Keir Starmer. At the dispatch box, I would say that probably they're quite similar performers. I would say Starmer probably just about has the edge, but that might not translate into a TV debate. We'll have to wait and see.
Now, we want to talk to you a little bit later about Jeremy Corbyn being expelled from the Labour Party, standing as an independent candidate. But thank you for now, Olivia. We'll speak to you in a little bit, I'm sure. But we can go live now to Dover because a boat approaching there.
Yeah, these are live pictures of a boat approaching that could be taking the 10,000th illegal migrant across the Channel. This is a big moment. We think today, if there are enough migrants on board this boat, we're going to pass that 10,000 mark for migrants across the Channel this year.
Yes, and as you can see, it's quite a sunny, relatively calm day there in the Channel. 10,000. We're going to be speaking to Mark White in a little bit because he's there monitoring this all for us. But 10,000. This is not the news that Rishi Sunak will want on the second day of his election campaign. 10,000. This could be the boat carrying that 10,000th migrant.
Not the news, and frankly, not the image either. After all, what a stark reminder that this is the ferry service laid on by the British taxpayer to pick people up halfway across the Channel and not turn them around and bring them back to France, because the French don't let us do that, because we don't have a returns agreement with France, despite the tens of millions of pounds that we send France every single year to try and stop the boats getting in the water. But once the boats get in the water, well then, we can't take them back to France, despite the amount of money that we pay the French. This is a ferry service, and it does just smack of incredibly bad optics. We can see a couple of people wearing life jackets just on the front of that boat. No doubt there'll be some more inside as well, but we think this is the boat carrying the 10,000th migrant.
Yes.
Illegal migrant across the Channel.
Stark contrast to the Prime Minister's pledge, of course, to stop the boats. This may well hold this boat the 10,000th migrant of the year. So there you go. We'll bring you updates as we get them.
In other news, Nigel Farage has raised eyebrows this week after revealing he will not be standing in the general election, implying he'd rather focus on the upcoming US presidential election.
Yes, he caused a further stir yesterday by saying that although he won't stand for reform, he will campaign for them, as well as claiming that he was mere days away from launching an election bid. It's all interesting.
However, the deputy leader of Reform UK, Ben Habib, seemed unaware of such a plan. Is there a bit of a split in Reform UK? Let's take a listen.
has decided not to stand as a candidate, but telling Tom Harwood on his show last night that he was actually planning to launch a campaign to become an MP next week.
I'm deputy leader of Reform UK, as you mentioned, and I was entirely unaware of his plans to launch a campaign next week.
Contradicting, I would say. So what exactly is going on in the Reform Party, and what does Nigel Farage's decision mean for their chances across the country?
Well, let's speak to an activist for the party, indeed their candidate in Scarborough and Whitby, David Bowes. David, thank you for joining us. There seems to be trouble in paradise. Ben Habib this morning digging at Nigel Farage. Is there a bit of discontent within the Reform Party, a bit of disappointment perhaps, that Nigel decided not to stand?
I mean, I can only speak personally. There's been no expectation from the PPCs that I'm in touch with. I mean, it's obviously a personal decision from Nigel. Nigel's an extraordinary campaigner. You know, he's still. My understanding is he's still going to, you know, campaign for reform and be involved in events around the country. Let's see what happens.
I mean, David, Nigel is saying he's claiming that Rishi Sunak made this decision to call this snap election because he'd caught wind of Nigel planning to stand in a week or so. That was the plan. Is that what you heard too? Do you think that's why Rishi Sunak decided to call this election?
I've got no insight into that at all. I mean, it's the first I heard of it was on GBNews this morning with Ben. Like I said, there's no expectation from us regarding Nigel, and there's been no communication whatsoever within the party. We're united that the message from the party is pretty straightforward. It's immigration. We've had 685,000, I think, was the figure for the last up to the end of last year, and we are determined as a party to look at policies to address that, because, you know, every other policy pales into insignificance unless that tidal wave of humanity is addressed.
Of course, the changes that came in January, at least according to the head of the Migration Advisory Committee, suggest that could bring numbers down to 150 or 200,000. I mean, that would be the most extraordinary.
They want net zero immigration.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you look at any issue, if you look at health, if you look at education, all the pressures on every single issue, every policy that's announced by every party is impacted by the sheer number of people. I mean, in this area, which is Whitby and Scarborough, we're a little bit like Cornwall. You know, the big issue is housing. How do we accommodate, and how do public services cope with the sheer number of people that are arriving in the country? And unless we address that, all the other questions on every other issue, you know, are academic, essentially.
David, do you think it rather undermines your points and your policy pronouncements and everything else when various people at the top of the party prefer to talk about each other than they do the policy? I mean, it wasn't a particularly good look for Ben Habib to sort of be laying into Nigel this morning.
Yeah, like I said, it's the first time I heard it, and I think, as far as I'm aware, from you know, a local candidate point of view, the hierarchy within the party is completely united, and I've got no insight whatsoever into any communication or you know, from Nigel to other people within the party. If anything, you know, Nigel's announcement clarifies Richard and solidifies Richard Tice's position within the party, because there won't be any media speculation around that going forward.
I mean, David, there has been some analysis done in the Telegraph today that suggests Reform poses a major threat to Conservatives in 28 seats across the North and the Midlands in England. How much of the vote are you planning to get? Are you hoping to get in your area?
You know, Emily, as much as I possibly can. I mean, we're campaigning very, very hard. I've got a great team in Whitby and Scarborough. We meet monthly in either town. We see a real opportunity. The Red Wall is prime hunting ground, if you like, for Reform UK. And I think all the issues that Reform stand for resonate extremely well with voters on the doorstep when I'm out campaigning. and I've had nothing but goodwill and best wishes from anybody I've come into contact with in the constituency. I'm not a traditional politician. You know, the reason I stood for election was for the same reason, you know, GB News exists, and that is essentially to provide a voice and a receptacle for people who are, you know, fed up with Tweedledum and Tweedledee politics and address the major concerns that is on everybody's lips.
Well, David Bowes, thank you so much for joining us, Reform Parliamentary candidate for Scarborough and Whitby. Appreciate your thoughts and your time. Now, much more to come on the show. After the break, we're going to hear from Sir Keir Starmer and Sir Ed Davey, both of the knighted party leaders. What have they been up to? That next.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
Apparently alcohol abuse is costing England £27 billion a year. I mean, in fairness, that's the price of 2 rounds in London, Nicholas.
Yeah, tell me about it. Not that I'm a big consumer of alcohol, I'm very Mediterranean in my consumption, but revealed alcohol abuse costs soar to £27 billion a year. So this cost basically encompasses a variety of aspects, from health-related problems, so the cost on the NHS, lack of productivity, people who lose their jobs, social services, and all that. And of course, it has been on the rise, 37% more compared to last time this was studied in 2003. So now Institute of Alcohol Studies and some other groups are pushing or asking for tougher taxes and tougher regulation. But is that the solution? Like in ancient Rome, they said, in medium stat virtus, like moderation, virtue is in moderation. And again, if they're going to raise the price, people like myself or yourself who are moderate consumers, pardon?
You're going to turn to heroin. Because it'll become... I mean, well, this is what's happened in Scotland.
It becomes unaffordable, so...
Yeah, in Scotland, they had minimum unit alcohol pricing, and so it pushes up the cost of getting off your tree for your average Scottish ne'er-do-well who likes to sit on a bus stop and drink a bottle of cider. So instead, they're turning to street drugs, which are cheaper by comparison.
That is just terrible. I like that the alcohol industry have come back on this. A guy called Matt Lambert, who's the chief executive of the Portman Group, and they represent the alcohol industry. And he says that the IAS, that's the group who've created this, have failed to take into account the significant direct economic contribution of the alcohol industry to the wider economic and social benefits of moderate and responsible alcohol consumption. Well, it's so true, isn't it? We've got a declining birth rate. We need people to get drunk and chat each other up.
Yeah.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 25 minutes past 12. Now, some good news. The average household could be more than £120 better off each year from July.
Yes, that's quite good news.
Yeah, nothing to be sniffed at. Ofgem is lowering the price cap, the energy price cap, by 7%.
And this comes as energy becomes the first battleground on the election campaign, with Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer pledging cheaper gas and electricity bills for voters. I guess the question is, which party do you trust to lower your energy bills?
And is there a catch to any of this news? Well, to find out is GB News business and economics editor Liam Halligan joining us now with On the Money. Liam, undoubtedly good news, but some reports of storms on the horizon.
I think that's right. Let's just go through the basics first, Tom and Emily. The Ofgem energy price cap, that's a cap set by Ofgem, the energy regulator, on the cost of each unit of gas or electricity. And if you look at the average household with the average usage, you get the average cap, if you know what I mean. So even if you use more gas and electricity, you're going to pay more for it. But the unit cost is capped. So let's have a look at those unit costs. So here we go. The average gas and electricity bill, average family usage, will be £1,568 a year from July. I think I've got a graphic, if it can be shown. That's down 7% on present levels, and that's a saving of £122 a year for the average household. The catch is that this cap is likely to rise again in October. Why? Because wholesale gas and electricity prices will rise around the world, certainly in Western Europe, as we go back into the winter, and also because there's danger of geopolitical squalls in the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, which will push up those wholesale oil and gas prices, pushing up wholesale energy prices. And it's worth saying that even though the cap's just come down to around £1,500 a year, let's keep this in perspective, because the month before the war in Ukraine, the standard UK combined annual utility bill was £1,084, so around £500 less. Here we go, yeah, we got the graphic. Thank God for that. So there you go, the average gas and electricity bill, just over 1,500 quid from July, down 7% on current levels, 122 quid saving for the average household per year. The cap's likely to go up again in October, in my view, and we're still way above, even though this cap's just come down, where we were before the war in Ukraine. The average combined gas and energy bill for the average UK household, 50% higher now than it was before the war in Ukraine back in early 2022.
Yeah, it's good to get that perspective. So much cheaper before the invasion of Ukraine. I want to ask you about Labour's big idea for a state-owned, presumably partially state-run, Great British energy company. Keir Starmer seems to be claiming that not only will this save us money, but it may even make us money.
Well, you know, I'd like to say I've got a well-thought-through view on Labour's energy plans, Emily, as you'd expect from me. I've looked at the data and I've weighed it up objectively and brought my analytical prowess to bear. But I have no idea about Labour's energy plan, because apart from the slogan, Great British Energy, we're going to nationalise it, which I'm sure will appeal to a lot of the Labour left, we have no detail whatsoever on this plan. What is absolutely clear is that electricity prices, energy prices in general, are part of the battleground for this general election. The Tories, Claire Coutinho, the Energy Secretary, she was out and about this morning. They are now saying, because an election's in the offing, what some of us have been saying for years, that it's unfair that the subsidies for renewable energy companies to build their wind turbines and to build their solar panel farms are put on energy bills. They should come out of general taxation. If you put them on energy bills, the poor disproportionately pay for the shift to net zero, because they disproportionately spend more on energy than better off households. So the Tories are now saying on the front of the newspapers, they're briefing, oh, we're going to scrap these green subsidies on people's energy bills. Labour, meanwhile, are talking in slogans rather than details. And this is a really core part of the cost of living crisis, because when energy bills are high, as I say, the poor get disproportionately hammered, and those high energy bills, and, you know, take it from me, we're paying more for our electricity in this country than pretty much any West European economy. Our companies pay huge amounts of money for electricity. That feeds into inflation. That feeds into productivity. That's a big reason why the UK has been growing at such a sluggish pace in recent years, because energy is so expensive in this country.
As with so many issues in the United Kingdom, when it comes to the particulars of policy, whether it's AI or biotech or fintech, we get it so right. But when it comes to the very, very basic things like like the price of energy or the availability of buildings, we get it very wrong.
Well, I'm not sure I buy into this idea of this patriotic state-run energy company, and I imagine it will end up costing much more than the Labour Party say if they set that out. I don't think they actually have told us how much it is, although I think they've said they're going to fund it with more windfall taxes, so we shall see. Thank you, Liam. Sorry, we're going to have to leave it there to get to the bulletins, but Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor.
Well, coming up, a legendary London cinema is vandalised after showing an Israeli film. We're going to speak to a man who joined a counter-protest, a large counter-protest yesterday. That's after your headlines with Aaron.
It's 12:32, I'm Aaron Armstrong. The Prime Minister says the lowering of the price cap shows his plan is working, as both parties look to make energy policy an electoral dividing line. Speaking in Belfast as part of his whistle-stop campaign tour of the UK, Rishi Sunak says the economy's turned a corner and he'll be telling voters over the next few weeks how the Conservatives plan to secure Britain's future.
Inflation has fallen back to normal levels. The economy grew faster than all our competitors at the beginning of this year. Today we've had the news that energy bills are falling again and wages have been rising faster than prices for almost a year now. And that's why it's the right time to turn to the future. And the world is sadly a more uncertain place than it's been in decades. And that's why what the country needs is leadership that can provide bold action and that has a clear plan, because that's how we will deliver a secure future for everyone in our country.
So Rishi Sunak's been in Belfast. The Labour leader is campaigning in Scotland today, where he is pledging to bring down costs with a new publicly owned green power company. Sir Keir Starmer says now is the time for change.
And whether you're a family that's been struggling with the cost of living for grindless month after month after month, whether you're a business that's been struggling against the odds for a very, very long time now, or serving your communities, this is for you, because this is an election about change. And Scotland's voice is vital.
The number of people sleeping rough's doubled since 2010, despite the Conservative Party's promise to tackle the crisis. The government published a strategy to tackle the growing problem 2 years ago, reiterating its manifesto commitment from the last election. But figures show there were nearly 4,000 people sleeping rough across England on a single night in February last year, more than twice the recorded figure from 2010 when the Tories came to power. Housing organisation Shelter says homelessness is a political choice and has called on MPs to do more to tackle the problem. And some breaking news just coming into us from Dover. More than 10,000 Channel migrants have now crossed illegally into the UK this year. GB News can exclusively reveal the milestone figure was reached today after another 154 people arrived in Dover, having crossed in 3 small boats this morning. The latest arrivals will come as a blow to Rishi Sunak on his second full day of campaigning, after he promised his government would stop the boats. You can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of the markets then. The pound buys you $1.2719 and €1.1733. Gold will cost 1,840 pence and 88 pence per ounce. The FTSE 100 is at 8,306 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
The latest GB News travel.
The A1M all traffic is being temporarily held. It is blocked due to an accident. Long delays between Wetherby at 46 through to 47. Delays to Boston Spa at 45. Clockwise on the M60, there is a partial closure at junction 16 for Pendlebury. That is due to an obstruction on the road. Southbound on the M5, a lane closure on the exit slip road at 3 for Birmingham due to emergency repairs. Traffic is coping well. Coastbound on the M20, there are speed restrictions Guinness, where freight traffic heads for a channel crossing. They must go through the Cones area between junctions 8 through to Ashford at 9. Finally, the southbound side of the M5 exit slip road at junction 12 for Quedgley and Hardwick is partially blocked due to a broken down vehicle. That's the very latest travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
Well, we're delighted about this because the boss of JD Wetherspoon has credited demand for fashionable Guinness as the pub chain reported a jump in sales.
Now, Guinness has benefited from a boom in demand over recent years, shaking off its association with rugby lads and old men to appeal to a much younger audience and loads more women.
We've got our Guinness here.
Oh, yeah.
Cheers to you.
Cheers.
I'm not sure about this boozing on air at this time of the morning, but I'll let you off on this occasion.
As it's you, Tim, as it's you. Now, Guinness is an acquired taste for many people, so I'm surprised it's become so popular.
Yes, it is a real surprise. I think it's always been a popular drink among the demographic you mentioned, the older guy. There's about 80 or 90% of pub trade over the last 30 or 40 years, and probably longer, are a similar range of products. But there's a varying 10, 20% according to fashion. You had vodka Red Bull 20 years ago. You had an Irish cider poured over ice, which came from no one knows where. You had Alco-Pops. So there's an unpredictable range of products which have been the fashion of the moment. But the fashion of the moment, very unpredictably this time, is Guinness. And no one knows why. As you say, it's an acquired taste. Young people tend not to like it. Most of the fashionable drinks over the decades have been quite sweet. And Guinness obviously isn't. So, yes, I think the Guinness brewery, St James's Gate in Dublin, they'll say it's brilliant marketing. But like the rest of us, they rely a bit on luck.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 39 minutes past midday. And we can now confirm that the total number of migrants who've entered the channel, entered the country, arrived by channel this year, has reached 10,000.
Yes, GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White is in Dover on the scene for us. Mark, an astounding figure.
Yeah, it's important. It's a milestone figure, and we've reached 10,000, 10,036 to be precise, a whole month earlier than we did at this point last year. At this point last year, we were just at 7,600 odd, so we are 35% up on last year's figures. And that really indicates the difficulty that the government was probably going to be faced with in the months ahead as we get into flat calm conditions and many more small boats come across the English Channel, with, on the really calm days, up to 1,000 coming across on a single day. Well, this week we had 3 days of bad weather. It cleared up overnight, and that allowed for these small boats to push off from the shores of France to make that illegal journey across to the UK. And so far today, 3 small boats have made it across, carrying 154 people. The first boat was picked up by the Dover Lifeboat at first light this morning and brought into the harbour here in Dover with 43 people on board. Then the Border Force vessel Defender brought in another 45 people a couple of hours later, and then just now the Border Force vessel Volunteer arrived here at the main migrant processing centre in Dover with 66 migrants on board. So that takes it to 10,036 for the year so far. On the second full day of campaigning for Rishi Sunak, it won't be welcome, there's no doubt, because he made it a key pledge of him and his government to stop the boats. But already this year now, more than 10,000 small boat migrants have crossed the channel.
Mark, looking behind you, it looks like a picturesque scene. Flat water, sunshine. I suppose it feeds into this idea that actually, no matter what the government says, no matter what the government does, no matter what hue the government is made up of, ultimately forces of nature seem to have greater control over these numbers than any policy from any party.
They absolutely do. It's a very good point. What I'll do, actually, is just step out of the way just now and allow our cameraman, Steve, to get a shot, as you queued it up, Tom, out into the channel. And you're right, it looks absolutely beautiful out there. It was choppy for a few hours overnight, though, because we'd had 3 days of bad weather, so it takes a while for the conditions in the channel to calm down, but they're going to calm down over the weekend. Sunday in particular, we're told, will be pretty much flat calm, so we're expecting significant numbers to come across on Sunday. And as we move into the summer months proper, it is only going to get better in terms of the weather conditions over longer periods of time, and when that happens, you get very significant numbers coming across. Now, the government was able to say last year that they had managed, they said, through their own endeavours, to result in a 36% decrease in the number of small boat migrants crossing the English Channel. However, this year that has been completely wiped out by the surge in migrants crossing the Channel. And as we, as I say, get into the better weather, the chances are that that number is only going to be going up very significantly. So by the Prime Minister going to the country on the 4th of July, it does then avoid that very difficult process, potentially, of that migrant surge that we would expect in the summer months.
And Mark, yesterday we were talking about Labour's position on all this. We know what the government says. They want this Rwanda plan to work as a deterrent. They say that will lead to the boats stopping. But Labour's position is a little more confused.
Well, I have to say, having followed Labour's position over the months and years, I haven't heard anything that I think, as someone that follows this whole issue and has done for many years, I haven't heard anything that I think is the kind of the silver bullet that really is going to make a huge difference in terms of actually cutting down the numbers. Yes, they're going to give more money to the National Crime Agency to employ hundreds of more officers, bringing together the likes of MI5 in there. That's undoubtedly, I'm sure, will make a difference. But it's such a multi-million-pound industry for the people smuggling gangs that even if you take a gang out, just like with the international drugs trade, that spot will be filled in fairly short order by more criminals who want to tap into this very lucrative revenue stream. And apart from the likes of the money to the National Crime Agency, the Border Security Command, they're talking about speeding up the processing of those who are in the asylum system. Well, it's fine speeding up the processing, but then if you've reached a conclusion on whether someone can stay or go, if you want to get rid of them, how do you get rid of them if they come from countries, and there are many out there that are regarded as dangerous and dysfunctional, that you can't send these people back to? They haven't come up with anything that actually answers that direct question. To be fair to Rishi Sunak, he has, in the form of Rwanda, if it ever properly gets off the ground. And other countries now in Europe are looking at that very same potential third country issue as one way of getting over their particular migrant problems as well.
Very interesting indeed. Thank you so much, Mark, for that update from Dover there. Now we can bring you some more breaking news. It's confirmed that the Bionic MP, Craig McKinley, will not fight the general election. He's made the decision that he is not ready. He is, of course, the MP, Craig McKinley, who had a quadruple amputation after contracting sepsis. And he's had a long recovery. And it looks like he's not quite yet ready to fight another election. He's put out a statement and he said that the suddenness of the election campaign means it will be difficult to withstand the rigours of an all-out election campaign, a campaign that I'd always wished to lead from the front. He says, my heart tells me to stand again, being so much unfinished business across local regeneration and national issues which are important to me. My head knows this to be impossible at this time.
Yes, he said after 36 hours of intense soul-searching, it was difficult to withstand those rigours. He's still recovering. And what a remarkable moment it was when he stood up in Parliament just 2 days ago. It feels like a world ago. But just on Wednesday, when he returned to Parliament, received that standing ovation, met with the Speaker, cracked some jokes even about breaking conventions, not wearing a jacket because they wouldn't fit over his new bionic arm and all the rest of it. This is a sad moment that he spoke to Christopher Hope, our political editor, in the marvellous GBNews documentary that aired on Tuesday, where he said, for years to come, I want children who come and visit Parliament, who come to the education centre in Parliament to say, I hope we see the bionic MP today. I hope we see the bionic MP.
I mean, that standing ovation, it brought a tear to the eye. It genuinely did. Very moving. And that very same day, that very evening, the election was announced. So there you go. A lot can happen in a day in the House of Commons. So Craig McKinley will not stand at the next election. He was planning to. He said that he would. But his recovery has to take priority. So there you go.
Well, let's hope that whatever Craig does next, he'll still be a vibrant part of conversation here in Britain, because his voice is very, very needed. But coming up, a pub's killing our spirits ahead of the FA Cup final this weekend. Find out why after this short break.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It will be a cloudy day for most of us through the rest of the day. However, some sunshine will break out across the south potentially later on today. In the north, though, drizzly rain for many areas. That's because we've still got this area of low pressure. This is the same area of low pressure that has brought very recent heavy rainfall to many northern areas. And so it will stay quite cloudy across the north and the west in particular, where drizzly rain will persist over the high ground and across coastal areas, and it will still feel fairly cool for the time of year up here. However, further south, particularly into the afternoon, there's a chance of some sunny breaks, highs of around 20 degrees across the south and east and into the high teens for many southern areas. So fairly pleasant in the sunshine, but for most of us, still a bit of a disappointing feeling day for this point in May. So by the end of the afternoon, we'll see quite a lot of clouds still across much of Scotland and some drizzly rain as well. As I said, it's most likely over the higher ground into Northern Ireland as well, parts of Cumbria, the southwest of Scotland too. Temperatures around 13 or 14 degrees to end the day. Further south, though, will start to turn a bit drier. That dry weather pushing further north into much of Wales and the Midlands as well. And it will turn drier and clearer as the night goes on, as that area of low pressure pushes further north, taking that clearer weather further north with it as well. So a fairly clear night. We could see some mist and fog developing for many southern areas where the ground is wet from the recent rainfall. But across the far north, some drizzly rain will continue across northern Scotland. But it's going to be a much cooler start to the day on Saturday. However, it will be a much brighter day as well, so it should warm up quite quickly. As I said, some early mist and fog to start the day, but plenty of sunshine across the UK. Saturday's looking like the best day of the bank holiday weekend. The afternoons will be a little bit cloudier, and there is a chance of a few showers across parts of England and Wales and potentially the southeast later on in the day. But in the sunshine, there'll be highs of 22 degrees. Bye-bye.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive?
Incompetent? That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
It's 12:51 and are pubs killing our spirits? Punters are reportedly being overcharged around £114 a year by pubs because they're short measuring beer and wine.
Goodness me. Well, according to research by the Chartered Trading Standards Institute, 7 out of 10 drinks in the UK are poured short, with beer the most likely drink to be under-poured.
What's all this about? Is there a solution? Or are we just expected to grin and beer it?
Yeah, very good.
Very good.
Well, let's get the thoughts now of publican and broadcaster Adam Brooks, whose pubs are in the 3 out of 10 that do pour proper, full pints, I'm sure. Adam, I mean, we've got some data now that suggests that a lot of people are getting shortchanged. Are you surprised by this?
Look, I got sent this article this morning and it's quite depressing, to be fair. You know, headlines like beer mugged and then, you know, sneaky tactic. It's not a sneaky tactic that anyone really does in pubs. There might be the odd one or wine bar or the odd pub that are cutting corners so much that they think that this is going to help them. But let's be honest, we're a public house. We're the front room of the local community. We are not going to start shortchanging customers at such a hard time as well. You know, I've been doing this nearly 20 years. I grew up living above pubs when I was a child as well. So pubs are in my blood. I'm no way going to start telling my staff to underpour. You know, you may have inexperienced staff that might get it wrong every now and then, but we are talking fractions, 4% they think. That is literally a millimetre or two in a pint glass. To the naked eye, you know, some customers have a different preference with the type of head that they want on their beer. You know, some people like a slightly bigger head, some people don't.
That's
so
true.
we are talking millimetres here, and I think it's a bit naughty from the Sun to say that this is a tactic from pubs to do this, because
well, it's the watchdog. It's the watchdog. But I think this happens quite a lot with wine, and I'm not sure how should a punter approach this if they feel like perhaps they've ordered a large glass of Pinot Grigio, but they suspect it's not actually a large glass.
Well, look, there's a line on a wine glass that you know that tells you the measure where you have to go to. Now, if anything, I've had to tell staff off for going above the line many times, you know, and especially like with beer as well. An inexperienced or a bad beer pourer can cost a pub thousands and thousands of pounds a year. So it's not something that, again, it's not something that a pub owner like myself is going to say to their staff, don't go above that, don't go beneath that line.
Yeah, Adam, I can't imagine that pub owners would be saying that sort of stuff, but I can imagine that it's quite hard to get staff who are fully trained. A lot of people do it as sort of temporary work. The labour market's incredibly tight right now. It could be that in the last couple of years, we've had less experienced people pouring pints. I know that when the brief time I worked behind a bar, I found it very, very hard to be able to get a pint that had, like, that head that was sort of less than half of the pint glass. It's a tricky thing.
The accepted liquid to foam ratio is 95% to 5%. This may differ, you know, very slightly in different pubs, but people know what they want. If they feel like they've got too big a head on their beer, they're going to say, please top that up. You know, it's just, I really am worried that at such a tough time for the pub industry, that we're getting articles like this that are really sort of inferring that we're trying to rip off our customers. If I'm honest, you know, I've only got one pub now. It's about surviving and, you know, creating a good atmosphere so people want to come back. The last thing that I'm going to want to do is shortchange my customers. You know, we're paying more for our beer than we ever have. We're paying more for our electric, more for our staff. We're paying more for everything. Rents are going up. You know, it's becoming such a tough industry. And there's just no way that publicans are going to start wanting to annoy their customers and shortchange them. We want to make pubs great again, you know, and it's successive governments have really sort of harmed pubs with their policies and their alcohol tax and all their regulations and whatever. We really do need to be careful that we could lose pubs in many towns and cities.
I think you're absolutely right. It is a fight for survival. Every day it seems there's another pub closing its doors. Thank you so much, Adam. Really great to speak to you. Adam Brooks there, publican and a broadcaster.
Well, coming up, we're going to be speaking to the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps. He's here after this break. Don't go anywhere.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Oh my God, are you joking? Not lying, I never won a penny in my life.
I don't know what to say.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life. Oh my God. Oh God. Oh, it shocks me. This is amazing.
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
He's meeting his father, the King, for just the second time since his father's cancer diagnosis. Harry's going to an Invictus Games gig at St Paul's on Wednesday, and his father is hosting a garden party at Buckingham Palace. Once they're all said and done, about 7 p.m, they are going to meet, apparently.
Yeah, that's
but
wonderful.
crucially not the Princess of Wales.
Well, I think it's a wonderful story, and obviously you would. If you're visiting the country, you haven't seen your dad and he's ill with cancer, of course you would go grab a Costa. I can't wait to see the pictures of them in Costa together, just having a little catch-up.
Do you think they might embrace?
I would hope so, but...
Do you know, I think it's really important that life's too short not to have a relationship with your family. I know too many people that aren't speaking, or they've fallen out because of money or whatever, and we're only on this earth for a very short time, and what a shame not to have a relationship with your own
haven't they?
son.
I mean, it's the trust issue that is really the problem here, and straight after this they're going to be heading off to Nigeria, and they're still involved in all of these sort of like commercial and media activities. If you don't have that trust there with your family, and you're responsible for breaking that trust down, it's not really, it's sort of on you, isn't it?
It's still mendable, though, I think, and we've all got people in our family that maybe we wouldn't trust with our bank details or something like that, so they can just not. You know, Charles shouldn't be going to Harry, guess what, you can't tell anyone. He's like, that's not what they're going to talk about, are they? They're not going to tell him anything.
The King is his father, but it's different, isn't it, if it's your brother, it's your sibling, whereas a father's probably perhaps more likely to be forgiving and to be wanting to sort of reunite. Do you think maybe it's going to be harder for him to mend that relationship with William and Catherine?
I think it's really, really hard. I mean, I can't see how they can... But they need to get in a room together. They need to speak. The only way that you are going to break down barriers when it comes to relationships is by facing it and speaking about it.
You say life's too short, but some would say, well, that's a perfect reason not to tolerate any nonsense.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Friday, the 24th of May. I'm Emily Carver.
You are? And I'm Tom Harwood.
The gloves are off. Rishi Sunak challenges Keir Starmer to 6 television debates. Yes, 6. Claiming the Labour leader does not have the courage to face him. But do pre-rehearsed TV debates still serve a purpose? We'll have that debate.
Jeremy Corbyn is expelled from the Labour Party today. Took them long enough. Well, that's as the ex-leader announces he will stand as an independent candidate. But after 40 years representing Islington North, could he win without the red rosette?
And locals rally outside a North London cinema after it was vandalised by suspected pro-Palestine activists. The cinema was due to screen a documentary about the horrors of October the 7th. We'll speak to one man who stood up to the anti-Israel mob. Yes, and as we said, we're going to be speaking to the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps very soon. This is a bit of a dividing line between the parties, Labour and the Conservatives in particular. The Conservatives, they are very much committed to this 2.5% in defence spending. Labour have said when resources allow.
The Tories did a bit of a hokey-cokey to get to 2.5%.
True.
Boris Johnson announced it, Liz Truss kept it, then it was put on the back burner, but then it was recommitted to, and they say that it's fully funded. And you're totally right to bring up the Labour Party's position on this, because it's a little bit curious. It's sort of ambition rather than a pledge.
Ambition, yes. We all have ambitions, don't we? But they don't all come to light.
And yet they don't say. They say that Labour says we'll get up to 2.5% when resources allow, but we're not going to include this in any of our spending documents. But then when the Tories say, oh, we'd like to cut national insurance when the resources allow, the Labour Party say the Tories have got a massive black hole in their spending plans. I mean, that doesn't make sense, does it?
But, you know, Grant Shapps, Secretary of State for Defence, lots of people telling him that 2.5% is not enough, considering how dangerous the world is. Remember, Rishi Sunak told us all how we're heading towards 5 years of danger with geopolitics and war and the like. So we're going to speak to the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, very soon. So get your questions in. Let us know what you want to know. I also want to ask him about what he thinks about that 10,000th migrant crossing the Channel. That would be good to get him on, but let us know what you think after the news bulletins.
Good afternoon to you. It's 2 minutes past 1. I'm Aaron Armstrong. The Prime Minister says a fall in the price cap is further evidence his plan is working, as both parties put energy at the centre of their electoral campaigns. Rishi Sunak completed his tour of the nation in Northern Ireland earlier and claimed the economy's turned a corner. He'll be telling voters over the next few weeks how the Conservatives plan to secure Britain's future.
Inflation has fallen back to normal levels. The economy grew faster than all our competitors at the beginning of this year. Today, we've had the news that energy bills are falling again, and wages have been rising faster than prices for almost a year now. And that's why it's the right time to turn to the future. And the world is sadly a more uncertain place than it's been in decades. And that's why what the country needs is leadership that can provide bold action and that has a clear plan, because that's how we will deliver a secure future for everyone in our country.
Well, Labour's confirmed it would pass the smoking ban if the party enters office, with the Conservatives having run out of time to get it through Parliament. The Labour leader has been campaigning in Scotland today. He's pledged to bring down costs with a new publicly owned green energy company. Now, Labour's hoping to win dozens of seats in Scotland after years of dominance by the SNP. Sir Keir Starmer says only Labour can stop the chaos and turn the page, as he outlined plans to cut bills and boost energy security.
And whether you're a family that's been struggling with the cost of living for grindless month after month after month, whether you're a business that's been struggling against the odds for a very, very long time now, or serving your communities, this is for you, because this is an election about change. And Scotland's voice is vital.
Jeremy Corbyn's confirmed he'll stand as an independent candidate in the general election against the party he once led. As a result, he's automatically been expelled as a member of Labour, which suspended him back in 2020 over claims complaints of anti-Semitism in the party had been, in his words, dramatically overstated for political reasons. The former Labour leader says he'll run as a voice for equality, democracy and peace in Islington North, which he's represented since 1983.
I believe in democracy. I want our political parties to be democratic. But members of Islington North Labour have been denied the right to choose their own candidate. And alongside that, the community as a whole has been disempowered because of that. So we have to stand up. We have to stand up and say, we're not taking this anymore. We will assert our rights.
Well, GB News can exclusively reveal more than 10,000 Channel migrants have crossed illegally to the UK so far this year. The milestone figure was reached today after another 154 people arrived in Dover, having crossed in 3 small boats this morning. The latest arrivals will be a blow to Rishi Sunak on his second full day of election campaigning. He has promised his government would stop the boats. The former boss of the Post Office has admitted she made mistakes in her handling of the Horizon scandal and says there's no one else to blame. Giving evidence for a third day at the Post Office inquiry in London, Paula Venables became emotional once again, as she admitted she hadn't recognised the imbalance of power between the institution and the individual. She said she had to rely on colleagues who were experts, and she had no reason not to take their advice. But Ms Venables denied accusations that she led the Post Office through deception. The number of people sleeping roughs doubled since 2010, despite the Conservative Party's promise to solve the crisis. The government published a strategy to tackle the growing problem 2 years ago, reiterating its manifesto commitment from the last election. But figures show there were nearly 4,000 people sleeping rough across England on a single night in February last year. That's more than twice the recorded figure from 2010, when Conservatives came to power. Housing organisation Shelter says homelessness is a political choice and has called on MPs to do more to tackle the problem. And are we all being ripped off in pubs? It turns out more than 2/3 of beer and wine being served are short-measured. Out of 77 pubs and bars visited by trading standards, around 70% of the drinks they were served were less than the prescribed quantity. That came to something like 96 short measures out of 137 orders. So for the average beer drinker, that equates to a loss of £1.70 a week or £88 a year. For wine, £2.20 short each week, £114 a year. And it comes as the price of drinks hits all-time highs. Well, for the latest stories, you can sign up to our alerts. The QR code's on your screen and the details are on gbnews.com. Now, back to Tom and Emily.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 1. Now, the Conservative MP for South Thanet, Craig McKinley, has announced he is no longer seeking re-election at the forthcoming general election.
Yes, Mr McKinley, who recently lost both his hands and his feet in a severe case of sepsis, spoke with our political editor, Christopher Hope, just earlier this week about his ordeal.
Well, let's take a little listen to part of that extraordinary interview that took place earlier this week. And a warning for you, this clip does contain some sensitive images.
Everything was starting to shut down. It was quite serious, and my wife was told that they'd very rarely see people of this amount of illness in the hospital and perhaps prepare for the worst. Maybe they could have saved a bit of a foot, but my surgeon said you are better off having them off because you can have prosthetics and you'll walk far better than having a partial foot. I'm hoping people might give me the benefit of the doubt and say that man's been a fighter for himself.
Well, he was about to say that man's been a fighter for himself. Perhaps he'll be a fighter for me, a fighter for his constituents. He now says that the election's come too soon for him to have made a full recovery and get out there on the campaign trail.
Yes, he said that after 36 hours of intense soul-searching, he's decided not to rerun. He, of course, received that remarkable standing ovation on his return to the House of Commons on Wednesday.
Well, let's go now to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. And Olivia, Wednesday seems like a world away. It's pretty hard to imagine, sort of sitting there watching Prime Minister's questions as we all were on Wednesday afternoon, that just 2 days later, Craig McKinley, the bionic MP, would no longer be standing.
Absolutely, and it's a real shame. I was in the chamber for PMQs on Wednesday and witnessed that remarkable, really moving moment in the House of Commons where Craig McKinley was giving a standing ovation by members of Parliament on both sides of the House. And he had said just the night before in that documentary with Chris Hope that he was planning to stand again for South Thanet. Unfortunately for him, this election has just come too soon. He was planning to phase his return to the Commons back in over the next few months. He only had that operation that removed his hands and his feet 6 months ago, so he was only planning to be in sporadically for the next couple of months. Obviously, the rigours of an election campaign is very, very different from a sporadic return to Parliament. And McKinley also points to the fact that even after the election, if he were to be re-elected, he would be working the kind of 70, 80-hour weeks. He said that he was working before his illness, and he doesn't think that he would be able to do that again. Really, really disappointing for him, and just a sign of how nobody knew that this election was coming. Just a few days ago, McKinley was all ready and willing to stand again, and there will be so many other MPs now soul-searching and trying to work out if they too want to take this opportunity to stand down. It would be very bad for the Conservative Party if any more MPs do stand down. 74 have now said they won't be standing at the next election. In 1997, just before Blair's landslide, it was 75. I'm sure that is not a statistic that Rishi Sunak would like to repeat.
Yes, that's very interesting, the figures there. Running a campaign is a laborious task, really, isn't it? And if you're only very partially at the beginning of your recovery with something like this, it would be near impossible, really, for him to do it properly. He says in his statement that he faces numerous future operations, and he's only just started the prosthetic journey. He has weekly physiotherapy, occupational therapy sessions too. He clearly just has thought, or at least his statement suggests that he's thought about it and thought, you know what, I actually can't do this in my condition.
Well, exactly. Perhaps if the election had come 6 months later, as we were all assuming, then he would have been a bit further along that road to recovery. But at the moment, everything is so unknown for Craig McKinley. He's only just had these prosthetics fitted. He doesn't know how he's going to get on with them. He just doesn't know what sort of health he'll be in. And he said himself that what he wants to do, if he's running an election campaign, is to be leading from the front. And at the moment, he just doesn't feel that he is able to do that. I think most politicians, from all sides of the House, will think that Craig McKinley is a big loss to Parliament. He was lauded on all sides for being a fantastic public servant, and obviously he's shown remarkable dedication to his job back in Parliament just 6 months on from this horrific illness which claimed all of his limbs. It's a real shame that he won't be standing. I think most people agree with that. And I think particularly the Brexiteers on the Conservative benches will be very, very disappointed. He was a huge voice for Vote Leave. He helped set up the Vote Leave campaign. And I think he'll be a loss to Parliament generally.
Yes, well, thank you very much indeed, Olivia Utley, our political correspondent there in Westminster. Now, please do keep your questions coming in for the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps. Some of you are already asking. For example, Marianne saying, ask Grant Shapps what he thinks would be the biggest threat to our defence under Labour. Yes, Rishi Sunak and Grant Shapps have made it clear that they think security would be at risk under a Labour government. What evidence do they have for that claim?
I think I should also bring the news that the Banff and Buchan Member of Parliament, Scottish Conservative, David Duguid, has announced that he will not be standing either. He's currently in hospital. He has been in hospital since the 11th of September. In a statement, he says he's been in the intensive care units being treated for an illness affecting his spine, and during that time he acquired pneumonia. So it shows how cruel snap elections can be for MPs with illnesses, for MPs recovering from diseases, many choosing not to stand.
And how few people knew that this was coming. I mean, did the Prime Minister know? For very long. But in other, more good news, the average household could be more than £120 better off each year from July. That's because Ofgem has lowered its price cap by 7%.
Well, it comes as energy becomes the first battleground on the election campaign. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer are both pledging cheaper gas and electricity bills, but in slightly different ways.
Well, joining us now is Ben Hopkinson, policy researcher at Britain Remade. Ben, thank you for joining us. I'm very interested to get your perspective on Labour's big policy, big pledge on energy. Great British energy sounds patriotic, but do you know the detail?
Well, I think it is important when you consider large power projects that we're hoping the winner of the next election will deliver, whoever that may be. When you think about delivering large nuclear power plants, it's important to have some involvement from government, whether that be a Great British Nuclear, as the Conservatives are planning, or Great British Energy, as Labour has announced.
Ben, so Great British Energy under Labour might not actually be all that different from Great British Nuclear, which the Tories have already announced. It's sort of more of an investment vehicle than a sort of public-facing energy company. It's just a mechanism by which the government can subsidise different energy forms.
Yeah, it is a little bit more expanded than the Conservatives' plan. For example, they're looking into investing into offshore floating wind, which could be a very good, cheap renewable source to help further bring down people's bills.
But Ben, why do we need the government to invest in this? If this is cheap energy that's easy to do, surely private investment would be rushing to make money providing all of this cheap energy. Why does it require some sort of government investment?
Well, one thing that I really hope that the government does focus on would be cutting the regulations and the uncertainty that exists within the planning system right now. So if a private company were to build an offshore wind farm, for example, it would take them up to 13 years to do that, even though building only takes 4. So it's the needless regulations and restrictions that exist that are holding back our green transition. So Great British Energy could be a great vehicle there to encourage slashing these regulations and getting clean, renewable, cheap energy rolled out a lot quicker.
Well, some optimism there. Thank you very much indeed, Ben Hopkinson, policy researcher at Britain Remade. I must say I'm not sold on the idea myself.
But that extraordinary statistic, 13 years to get an offshore wind farm up and running, just 4 years to build it, 9 years to fill in forms and comply with regulation. I mean, what sort of state have we got ourselves into?
I mean, Tom, don't pretend you're surprised. I mean, we can't build anything in this country.
No.
But anyway, in other news, the Phoenix Cinema in East Finchley, North London, has seen pro-Palestinian campaigners call to boycott the Seret Film Festival and a private showing of a film documenting the Hamas terror attack at the Nova Music Festival on October the 7th.
Well, the graffitiing of the venue saw a pro-Israeli counter-protest after "No to Art Washing" was scrawled on the legendary cinema. Well, Josh Howie was one of those who attended the counter-protest. Delighted to say that he joins us now. Josh, this was, I suppose, an uplifting moment of a community coming together, but in response to something pretty horrific.
Yeah, I know. I don't like automatically bringing up Nazi Germany, but that kind of graffiti was the kind of graffiti that existed back then. And so seeing it, I think, really stirred a lot of people. And I was at the counter-protest on Saturday, where it was about 100 Jews with, about 100,000 sort of pro-Hamas protesters walking by. It was a horrific 3 hours of racism and hatred directed to us. So as I approached yesterday evening to the cinema, I was genuinely kind of shielding myself internally again to face this kind of onslaught of hate. And then when we got there, it was like the rest of the North London Jewish community had sort of heard the call and came out, and it was dancing and Israeli flags and some British flags and just dancing in the street and celebrating. And it was like the tables had flipped, and finally just enough Jews just coming together to go, enough is enough. We've had this hatred on our streets every weekend, and as you can see in this clip here, it's sort of like escorting the sort of pro-Hamas protesters back to the tube station. It was an amazing feeling, and then we just got to kind of dance in the street afterwards. Basically
booting them out of East Finchley. And I know this area of London very well. You don't usually see this type of thing outside the tube station there on the high street with all the shops and everything going on. But I was watching this yesterday evening, watching all these clips coming out of this and thinking, How do these people who have taken it upon themselves to graffiti a cinema for showing a film about the Hamas attacks possibly see themselves as the good people, the virtuous people in this? This is pure and simple anti-Semitism and intimidation, isn't it, really?
Well, exactly. And there was another protest outside of Hampstead cinema, I think, about a week ago. And it was much less people turned out. It was much, but I think this graffiti really sort of was a real wake-up call to people that the silent majority that has to sort of come out. And you see from this little clip of me just turning the camera around like that, you know, every weekend we see a photo of a few kind of as a Jew cranks and a bunch of fake Jews at these, like I say, these pro-Hamas protests, and anti-Semites get to kind of use them as this kind of tokenism of like, look, not all Jewish people support Israel, but this is the Jewish community who came out. These are this is the Jewish community that I'm part of. Our synagogues, our schools, and it was just so.
Well, Josh, do you not accept that there are Jewish people who are anti-Israel or on the pro-Palestinian side of this debate?
A handful. The idea that they're representative in any way of the Jewish community is absolutely ridiculous. And there's more people pretending to be Jewish to embolden the anti-Semites, to make them go, oh, no, look, there are Jewish people over there. So actually, no, we're not anti-Semitic at all. And it's just all
so you think
alive.
there are people at these protests actually pretending to be Jewish?
Oh, absolutely. You see them. They have, at best, a tenuous connection to, like, a great-grandfather who might have been Jewish or whatever, and they use that as some kind of shield to protect the accusations of racism. But we saw it within the Labour Party. We've seen it online. So many people, like one of the biggest Twitter accounts, pumping out hatred towards it. It's called Torah Judaism. And everybody goes, oh, look, these are religious Jews and they're anti-Israel. And it turns out it's some guy in Turkey.
Whatever the case with that and the makeup of the pro-Palestine protest, this type of intimidation in a pretty Jewish area of London, and as you say, another cinema was targeted the other week just for showing some films from Israeli films. I mean, it is just well, thank you for going out there and supporting the cinema and supporting your community, because it needs to be done. It needs to be done. Josh Howie, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Well, coming up, Sir Keir Starmer has been branded as the knight afraid to fight by the Tories. See what they did there? Yes. Sir Keir Starmer. Anyway, they demanded that he commits to more than 2 TV debates. Of course, in 2010 we had 3 TV debates. Traditionally, the United States have 3 TV debates. Why is he only committed to 2? We'll be asking whether televised debates are necessary, or perhaps they're all a big waste of time. That debate coming next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So the UK's most popular baby names have been revealed, with Noah and Olivia again topping the annual list. In at number 2 is Mohammed for boys. List is on the screen here. Number 3 for boys is George. Then it goes Olivia. Then it's Leo, Arthur, and so on. And for girls, so Olivia is number 1. Then Amelia, Isla, Ava, Lily, Ivy, Freya. There we go. Any of those names take your pick? Where's Dawn, by the way?
Well, yeah, there's on the Telegraph website, right, there's a really good way linked into this where you can actually put your name into the search engine, and these are names from 2022, by the way, and it tells you how common your name was. And I did put Dawn in. It's never been that popular. Can't think why. And there were only 5 babies named Dawn in 2022.
Really? That's surprising.
It's not a full confession here, right? My middle name, Mum, I hate you, is Maureen. Why is everyone laughing? My middle name is Maureen, which is a good old-fashioned East End name, and that has completely died out. There were no babies named Maureen.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Names like Keith, for example, Peter. Would you call a baby these days Keith or Ian? Baby Ian?
Without a doubt. I feel like I'm in a persecuted minority, you see, because later on, when I'm watching the boxing with Terry, Steve, Mick, Phil and Kev, right, and Peter, there are no such names featuring in this list. We are dying out. Our names will soon be gone forever, and I feel victimised by it.
Likewise, I should think we should start a campaign group and go on a protest march through London.
Cans, what do you make about Mohammed being number 2 for boys' names?
You know, I'm not going to comment on people. You know, they're going to call what they want to call. What I find interesting is people that do double barrel because they can't decide, and you know, a lot of people do that, and that's a bit difficult because I think you should just pick a name. You know.
I tell you names that are falling down the list though: Harry and Meghan.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Well, 1:27 is the time, and is Sir Keir Starmer the knight afraid to fight?
That's the accusation of the Conservative Party after the Labour leader rejected Rishi Sunak's challenge to hold a record six televised election debates. Instead, he said he'll do only 2.
But at a time when politicians do the majority of their communicating on social media, the question is, in 2024, do we even still need these types of televised election debates? You know, surely they're all pre-rehearsed answers. How much do we actually learn? How much do we learn?
Well, to debate the question, we're joined by former advisor to David Cameron, Philip Blond, who thinks they're still very important, and former Labour aide, Stella Santakidou, who thinks that they're redundant in today's age. Well, Philip Blond, let's start with you. David Cameron, of course, was part of that inaugural generation of TV debates. We had 3 in 2010, and they did change a lot.
Well, I think party political debates are important for the viewers, but I don't think they're important politically, if I can put it like that. All the evidence shows, and there's been studies across numerous countries, Germany, UK, America, that actually political debates make no difference. And the single greatest predictor of what a voter will do after the political debates is their opinion before the political debates. But I do think that the concept of debate is important in a democracy, and the idea of leaders debating about ideas is, I think, quite important for the cohesion and the legitimation of the political system. And so in that sense, it looks genuinely democratic, in the same way we like in the House of Commons, the most popular moment is Prime Minister's Question Time. And so I think for the legitimacy of the democratic process itself, debates add to that, and that's why I think they matter.
Yeah, Stella, most people don't have the time or perhaps the inclination to look through the manifestos in full, to read up on absolutely every policy area and how the parties differ. I guess these debates make it easier for people to choose who to vote for.
They certainly used to, but I think their only function right now is to be a fun distraction for political nerds, because the vast majority of people are not going to be watching these political debates. The main way that they will access these videos will be through TikTok or Twitter. So all these debates really achieve is they give some fun sound bites that people will then share throughout social media and on the news, hoping that they will reach voters. I do think that it makes sense that whoever is ahead in every election is wisely more hesitant to go on these debates because you don't want to mess a good thing. I think that Rishi Sunak in particular, the reason why he asked for 6 debates, which is a bit brave, is because exactly he wants to look like he's very strong, and because he knew that, of course, Keir Starmer has no reason to accept 6 debates. This is unheard of. So he's hoping to make him look weak in comparison. However, I wouldn't be as optimistic as he is, because the polls could yet widen still after the debates, because he is not particularly telegenic, not least compared to Keir Starmer. So I do think there are dangers for both political leaders. What I would agree with the previous speaker, what I would disagree rather with the previous speaker, is that I don't think that debates are important for the voters. I think that they are something that the politicos are watching a lot more. So for the actual parties, for example, the members of parliament who will be voting for these leaders if there is another leadership election, or who will be choosing whether they should be supporting a specific leader or not, I think they are a lot more important for these people.
For debates that are perhaps isolated and just politician versus politician in an empty room, perhaps that's the case. However, with a GB News People's Forum, where it's ordinary voters asking questions of politicians, invitations have been extended both to Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, either to do so individually or together in the same People's Forum format. Philip Blond, do you think that perhaps offers a bit more jeopardy, but also light as well, when it's ordinary folk asking the questions, real voters asking the questions, rather than the same tired political straplines?
Yeah, I like that format. Politics is about imagination, about the possibility of change, and I think that the American presidential debates, for example, where you have that they're all through a central interlocutor, doesn't work. It's dead. And I think there's a dynamism and a compelling element to ordinary people asking questions. It's why Question Time remains both popular on the BBC and popular, and the most popular part of our parliamentary kind of.
Yeah, I think they
TV.
work well, but when it goes into chaos, descends into chaos with people shouting out whatever they're feeling that day, then it can get a little bit unruly. But, you know, that's what politicians have to deal with when they're out campaigning. We're going to have to leave it there because we've run out of time. But thank you very much to you both, Philip Blond and Stella Santakidou.
Well, coming up, Jeremy Corbyn is going to stand. He's going to fight against Labour, and consequently, he's been expelled from the Labour Party. We're going to be getting the thoughts of a Labour Metro Mayor after your headlines with Aaron.
It's 1:33. Good afternoon to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong. The Prime Minister says a fall in the price cap is further evidence his plan is working, as both parties put energy at the centre of their electoral campaigns. Rishi Sunak completed his tour of the nation in Northern Ireland and claimed the economy's turned a corner. He says he'll make a case to voters over the next few weeks on how the Conservatives plan to secure Britain's future. Meanwhile, Labour's confirmed it would pass the smoking ban if the party enters office, with the Conservatives having run out of time to get it through Parliament. The Labour leader is campaigning in Scotland today, where he's pledged to bring down energy costs with a new publicly owned green power company. GB News could exclusively reveal more than 10,000 Channel migrants have crossed illegally to the UK so far this year. It's a blow to Rishi Sunak on his second full day of campaigning, after he promised the government would stop the boats.
Didn't know that information.
And the former boss of the Post Office has admitted she made mistakes in her handling of the Horizon scandal and says there's no one else to blame. Giving evidence for a third day at the Post Office inquiry in London, Paula Venables became emotional as she admitted she hadn't recognised the imbalance of power between the institution and the individual, but she denied accusations that she led the Post Office through deception. More on all of our stories in our later bulletins, or you can get more right now by scanning the code on your screen for GB News Alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
quick look at the markets. The pound buys you $1.2720, €1.1733 euros. The price of gold, £1,840 and 42 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,307 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It will be a cloudy day for most of us through the rest of the day. However, some sunshine will break out across the south potentially later on today. In the north though, drizzly rain for many areas. That's because we've still got this area of low pressure. This is the same area of low pressure that has brought very recent heavy rainfall to many northern areas. And so it will stay quite cloudy across the north and the west in particular, where drizzly rain will persist over the high ground and across coastal areas, and it will still feel fairly cool for the time of year up here. However, further south, particularly into the afternoon, there's a chance of some sunny breaks, highs of around 20 degrees across the south and east and into the high teens for many southern areas. So fairly pleasant in the sunshine, but for most of us, still a bit of a disappointing feeling day for this point in May. So by the end of the afternoon, we'll see quite a lot of clouds still across much of Scotland and some drizzly rain as well. As I said, it's most likely over the higher ground into Northern Ireland as well, parts of Cumbria, the southwest of Scotland too. Temperatures around 13 or 14 degrees to end the day. Further south though, we'll start to turn a bit drier. That dry weather pushing further north into much of Wales and the Midlands as well. And it will turn drier and clearer as the night goes on, as that area of low pressure pushes further north, but taking that clearer weather further north with it as well. So a fairly clear night. We could see some mist and fog developing for many southern areas where the ground is wet from the recent rainfall, but across the far north some drizzly rain will continue across northern Scotland. But it's going to be a much cooler start to the day on Saturday. However, it will be a much brighter day as well, so it should warm up quite quickly. As I said, some early mist and fog to start the day, but plenty of sunshine across the UK. Saturday's looking like the best day of the bank holiday weekend. The afternoons will be a little bit cloudier and there is a chance of a few showers across parts of England and Wales and potentially the southeast later on in the day. But in the sunshine, there'll be highs of 22 degrees. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello to you, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Yorkshire firstly, and the northbound side of the A1M, a lane closed for a collision, junction 46, heading up to 47. That's a Wetherby up to Allerton Park, queuing back to Boston Spa at junction 45. Westbound M62, Huddersfield to Rushworth Moor, junction 23 to 22. There's animals on the carriageway, so traffic naturally slowing down on the approaches. On the northbound side of the M1, from Ossett at junction 40 up to Cargate 41, a lane shutting queues, and that's due to a collision. Anti-clock M25, the earlier broken down lorry at Brentwood 28 to 27's gone, but still slow going. And on the ferries on DFDS, delays of up to an hour at the moment, and that's between Dover and Dunkirk. That's all due to an earlier technical problem there. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's 1:38. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, the ex-Post Office boss, Paula Venables, has denied the company's executive team, which she led, shielded the board from dirty laundry.
Well, that's as she also denied trying to close down a review into the software which led to the wrongful convictions of hundreds of sub-postmasters.
It's as her multi-day appearance in front of the Post Office inquiry continues.
And joining us now is Christopher Head, a sub-postmaster and victim of the Horizon IT scandal. Christopher, I think many victims of the Post Office scandal, of the Horizon scandal, will have thought that the calling of the general election on Wednesday really let Paula Venables off the hook for her first day of questioning. I suppose it's important to continue to shine a spotlight on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, when she first got out of the taxi on Wednesday, you know, the media was everywhere for her, and you know, we thought by the end of the day, when we heard the announcement of the general election, that you know, that things would subside. And I think the next morning that, you know, there was less media, and she was probably be quite pleased about that. But obviously across all the media outlets, it's continued. So I mean, it's good. I mean, you know, she needs to have the scrutiny about, you know, what she knew and what went on at the post office while she was at the top.
I mean, Christopher, she's been quite emotional today, hasn't she? She's sobbed. She's declared her love for the post office. She said, I loved the post office. I worked as hard as I possibly could to deliver the best post office for the UK. She goes on to say, I let these people down. I'm very aware of that. I mean, do you buy that she loved the post office? What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think you know, we can say that she maybe loved the post office, but obviously to the detriment of postmasters. Like, obviously she put the brand and the reputation and, you know, the profitability of the post office above all else, really.
What has been the most shocking thing that you think we've seen so far? Of course, we've seen texts thrown up. We've seen people suggest that she knew more than she said she knew at various points. What do you think has been the thing that is the biggest takeaway from her appearance?
Well, I think, you know, we're just seeing document after document, though, about what she was actually showing and what, you know, what she knew and actually when she knew it. And, you know, what we have to remember is that she could have put a stop to this very, very early on in, you know, 2013, 2014. But yet, you know, she said that she wanted to minimise the compensation. You know, we saw that, and then yet she denied that was not the reason that she wrote that. But it's there in black and white in an email. You know, she said that, you know, the idea of the mediation scheme in 2013 is to either avoid or minimise paying compensation, which shows that they never had, or she and the organisation never had any intention of putting this right.
And Christopher, have you received any compensation?
Well, we had the original payout from the High Court case in 2019, which is obviously the interim payment, and then the government had a top-up in 2022. We were then asked to prepare a fully quantified claim that the government themselves would pay for, you know, forensic accountants and your tax records and everything like that, and we submitted that last year. And they made me an offer on the 28th of December, which was 13% of what the professional claim was valued at, which obviously we rejected outright. And they made a further offer 4 months later on the 3rd of April, increased to 21%. But I mean, like I said, these are not claims that I've put together. I haven't come up with the figures. These are the experts that the government has pre-approved and paid for. And yet now they're denying to pay the amounts that the experts have said are due.
That is interesting. Of course, in the last few hours, actually, just yesterday and today, there's been a process in Parliament known as wash-up, where lots of bills, well, some bills are ditched and other ones are rushed through Parliament. One of the bills that was rushed through Parliament was the exoneration bill for postmasters, which does include some compensation provisions as well. I suppose this has been a priority for the government to get that through before the deadline this evening when Parliament shuts down. Are you pleased that there's been some political priority behind this?
Of course. I mean, look, I've been campaigning a long time on this, about the bill, you know, speaking to the Minister himself, Kevin Holland-Rake, and, you know, the other MPs in the House that have really pushed this legislation, Lord Arbuthnot and Kevin Jones. And, you know, it was important. I mean, I tweeted about it last night that, you know, it's so welcome that obviously many people, hundreds of people that had a conviction will now be cleared and obviously open the door to the compensation that they deserve. You know, and it was important that we didn't get this lost in the political football, you know, so to speak, and that obviously these people get a chance to be able to walk without having a conviction over their head.
Well, there's a huge amount of support behind you. Thank you very much indeed, Christopher Head. You're a sub-postmaster and one of the victims of the Horizon IT scandal.
Well, coming up, we're going to be speaking to a Metropolitan Mayor. Yes, Dan Norris. He used to be a Labour MP. Now he's the Mayor of the West of England. But he wants to unseat Jacob Rees-Mogg in the upcoming election. Could Mogg be facing a Michael Portillo moment? We're going to be joined by Dan Norris after this.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
The Eurovision, according to figures out this morning, had its most disastrous night to date because viewing figures are down by 2.5 million.
So the BBC had a drag queen on telling everyone that she was boycotting it.
Who was boycotting it?
Someone called Crystal, who came on the Newsnight to say that she was boycotting her North London party because of Israel. So maybe that's why the figures are down.
They cancelled some Eurovision parties in gay bars in Soho.
Exactly. So I wonder whether that's what did it.
North
London party. I think the whole of Dalston basically not tuning in is what's caused this massive drop in ratings because of the whole controversy around Israel. I have to say, a lot of those performers needed to go and see a hygienist. I mean, that man who was the Irish entry, who's supposed to be a satanic witch. She does pop witchery or something.
She screeched.
And she screeched a lot, and then took her clothes off. Yeah. And then there was a sort of devil man who was gyrating around her, who obviously hadn't cleaned his teeth in years.
That was the vodka break.
Okay, fine.
That was the vodka break. When I went and got.
And I thought the Israeli entry. I mean, I didn't really like the song. I liked her dress.
Well, I just voted for it because
I thought the choreography was
I hated
awful,
the way she was
but,
besieged in a hotel room.
But I did also think that the Ukraine entry was quite interesting because I know that the Israeli entry got into trouble for referencing the October 7th attacks, and she had to sort of rewrite her stuff because you're not allowed to mention the war or anything like that, which is fine. But then the Ukraine entry was very war. I mean, they had kind of gunfire coming in over her.
The whole thing, there was double standards.
There was quite a lot of that,
I mean, the people outside, the queers of Palestine...
Are we going to carry on paying for it, though? Because, I mean, the BBC pays the lion's share of it. That's us.
Yeah.
And we do spectacularly every year.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task. This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 47 minutes past 1. Now, the general election campaign is well underway. Full day 2. Keir Starmer, of course, launching his party's bid in Scotland today, following a public back and forth with Rishi Sunak over participation in TV debates.
Yes, indeed. Well, Jeremy Corbyn has also confirmed he will be running in the general election, but as an independent, resulting in his complete expulsion, from the Labour Party after more than 4 decades.
But here's another fly in the ointment. Could GB News presenter Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg be the next Michael Portillo? A big, important, famous Member of Parliament risk of losing his seat to the very man that he defeated in 2010. Well, let's speak to the man in question. Joining us now, Dan Norris. Dan, not only are you the candidate against Jacob Rees-Mogg in this election, you're also the West of England Metro Mayor, recently re-elected. Congratulations on that. Are you going to give up your mayoralty if you win your parliamentary seat?
Well, look, I'm not going to get ahead of myself because that's a decision for the electors of North East Somerset and Hanham to decide. And it'll be their verdict. It'll be the one that determines that. And obviously, I'll cross that bridge if and when I come to that. But look, I'm very proud to have been selected as the Labour candidate in North East Somerset and Hanham, a new constituency that's very similar to the boundaries when I was the MP prior to Mr Rees-Mogg. So I think it's going to be a very interesting and exciting contest for voters and the media. And I'm looking forward to it very much.
Do you get on with Jacob Rees-Mogg?
Well, absolutely. He's my constituent and I'm his constituent. And we obviously have dealings in my role as the mayor and his as a local MP. So, yes, we do.
So you're not going to get too vicious on the campaign trail?
I do not anticipate that at all.
This is, of course, a fascinating seat because it's an area of the world where the Lib Dems are also incredibly strong. So you've got a strong and previously elected Labour candidate in yourself, a very well-known Conservative candidate, but also the Lib Dems vying for seats like this throughout the area. Are you going to do a deal with the Lib Dems so that they fight less hard?
Well, we don't do deals, for one thing, but in any event, the Lib Dems are not strong in this constituency. There's never been a Lib Dem MP here. It's always been Labour or Conservative. So it's a clear choice. But what
in the local elections, they were fairly strong.
Yeah, they were, but that happens. That's certainly a modern trait now, that in local elections you get different local councillors to the party of the MP. But but they've never had strength at an MP level in my area where I'm standing.
Now, Jacob Rees-Mogg is quite the character. He's extremely well known. I imagine he's probably in, I don't know, the top 20 best-known MPs. I mean, I'm just guessing that. It'd be quite remarkable for him to be out of the House of Commons. Lots of people would miss him.
Yeah, I no doubt there would be some people who would miss him. He's a Marmite person. He charms many people and they are impressed by him. But on the other hand, there are many people who have exactly the opposite views to that. But I think that's not really what this contest is about. It's about the choice for Britain ahead. Now, Mr. Rees-Mogg has defended, and very well, the Tory record. But I think he's been defending the indefensible. And I think that's what the public of the North East Somerset and Hallam think, and the wider country at large. But it'll be their choice. They will be looking who is going to provide the best for them and their family, who's going to help them deal with the cost of living crisis, who's going to get the NHS back working again. A whole range of other issues are going to be important to them. And that's the verdict they'll be making, a verdict that determines their futures, not mine or Mr. Rees-Mogg's.
Dan, you're only a couple of weeks into your second term as being the Metro Mayor for the West of England. I'm sure you've got lots and lots of plans of what you want to do in your role, in your executive role in the West of England. Why aren't you being more clear about whether or not it's this particular seat of North Somerset and Hallam that gets your full attention, or the whole region that gets your full attention? It seems like there could be a bit of split loyalty here that perhaps your potential constituents and your current constituents deserve to know.
Well, look, I wasn't up for election this year, actually. So my term comes to an end next year. So there could potentially be an overlap. But look, I'm not going to cross that bridge until the electorate have decided, frankly. I wouldn't disrespect them to assume anything. They will weigh that up and think if that's important to them, they'll cast their vote accordingly. But what I'm absolutely clear about is the choice that the people of Britain have at the moment. And that is, do they want more of the same under the Conservatives for the last 14 years, which has frankly been disastrous, and they can see nothing seems to work anymore? Or do they want hope and positivity for the future? Do they feel that we could get to a better place and bring back Britain's future?
Can I get your reaction to the news that Jeremy Corbyn, the ex-leader of your party, has been expelled and he'll be standing as an independent candidate? What do you make of that? A long time coming?
Well, look. What I simply say is, as a person who's been in the Labour Party many years and been a Labour MP and had that great privilege, I cannot comprehend anybody who's been in that position standing against the Labour Party. And Jeremy has decided to do that, and so he's expelled himself. And I'm sad that he's done that, because he was given this great honour by the Labour Party members years ago to become leader. And I just cannot conceive of anybody who's been given that honour disrespecting the Labour Party by standing as an independent. But that's a choice for him. But what I'd simply say is, I suspect what it reflects is the fact that the Labour Party has moved on from Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn is not capable of being able to change and embrace the modern world and what the challenges of the future. And because of that, he has ended up in this place. It's kind of sad at one level, but frankly, I'm concerned about what happens for the public in the future and what's best for my country. And therefore, Jeremy Corbyn is not relevant to that.
And yet it took to today, several days into a general election campaign, to actually expel him as a Labour Party member. I think a lot of people would be asking, why didn't Sir Keir Starmer and the new leadership of the Labour Party expel him as a member much, much earlier?
I genuinely don't know the details. The thing about these things is they have to be done properly and well. And so, therefore, these things do take time. And clearly, it's a complicated thing. I wouldn't know all the details, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much indeed. Dan Norris, the man looking to unseat Jacob Rees-Mogg. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to be speaking to the Defence Secretary after the break. Grant Shapps, Secretary of State for Defence. Get your questions in.
Yeah, we really want to put them to him. So stick with us and we'll be getting to Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, our questions as well as yours after this short break.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. There will be some sunshine across southern areas to end the day, but for most of us it will stay rather cloudy and it's going to be quite a cold night tonight as well, particularly compared to recent nights. Drizzly rain is going to continue across northern areas. That's because low pressure is still nearby and a weather front, but through this evening that low pressure will gradually shift north and westwards, taking with it that cloudier and slightly wetter weather and introducing much clearer weather. The clearer skies from the south this afternoon will spread northwards and that will allow for temperatures to dip down into single figures, possibly low single figures across southern counties. There could also be some mist and fog around as well first thing, but also quite a good deal of sunshine as well. Saturday is looking like the driest day of the weekend and the warmest one as well. So fairly bright start across the far north of Scotland. Still some lingering rain across the northwest and the southwest probably, but for most of us it should be dry, if not a bit cloudy across northern areas. Across northern England, much of Wales and England, it should be a bright start. Temperatures will pick up quite quickly as the sun comes up, so you'll be into double digits at least by around 8 o'clock, and there'll be plenty of sunshine through the morning. That mist and fog should clear quite quickly. There's a potential for a few showers to develop, particularly across northern areas of England. Parts of Scotland as well could see some heavier showers on Saturday, but most of us should stay dry, and there's just a chance of some rain clipping the far southeast later on in the day. But in the sunshine, highs of around 22 degrees in the south into the high teens across the north. But there is a bit of a change on the way for Sunday, as this area of rain from the southwest will push northeastwards through the night, bringing a spell of wet weather. And once it does clear through, we will see plenty of showers breaking out across the country through Sunday and Monday. These could be quite heavy, possibly thundery, so it's going to turn much more unsettled and a little bit cooler for the rest of the weekend.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task. This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The
People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just gone 2 o'clock. My name's Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Now, joining us for the top of this hour is the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps. It must be said that defence is becoming a bigger and bigger issue in this general election. It was the end of last month that the Prime Minister pledged to raise defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. And, Mr Shapps, I've got to ask, on the first point, continually, your government says that this is a fully funded pledge to raise to 2.5% of GDP. You say you'll do it through cutting civil service jobs, but you don't say which jobs will be cut.
Yeah. So, afternoon, there'll be 72,000 civil service jobs. It actually includes 10,000 at the Ministry of Defence headquarters. I want to see money going into the front line instead. And that will take the civil service back to the size that it was before COVID. So this is not some draconian cut. It is a way to release money to do something that we think the defence of the realm is absolutely essential for this country.
But how will you achieve this cut? Will you have quotas for each department, or will some be further hit than others?
So the departments have all agreed with the Chancellor the reductions that will be required to do this. I did that even as the Secretary of State for Defence, even though we're primarily benefiting from it's 2.5%, which is the equivalent to a massive £75 billion.
Oh, hang on. The Defence Secretary is not 75 billion. It's only 75 billion extra if you assume that you were going to freeze defence spending.
Yeah,
but you weren't going to freeze defence spending.
On flat cash. Yeah, that's absolutely right. But it is a commitment nonetheless to that money. And I can tell you it makes a real significant difference if you're sitting in the Defence Secretary's chair, as I do, and you know that money's coming. And since every programme in procurement and defence is multi-year, it makes a very, very significant difference now to your planning. So it is important. And remember, Labour are not committing to this. They say they want to go to 2.5%. They won't cut those jobs in the civil service because their union friends will be upset. And so they haven't said when or how they do it. And it makes their view on security indefensible, in my view. It makes it makes a much less secure future. And that's one of the differences between us. We have clear plans, bold plans, and security at the heart of them. Labour are not offering any of those things.
I mean, the Prime Minister went as far as to say that if there's a Labour government, Vladimir Putin would be emboldened and essentially that our national security would be at risk. What evidence do you have to back up that claim? That's quite a big claim to make.
Yeah. So I think the problem is, it's one thing to wish that you had 2.5%. That is the Labour's position. It's another thing to take the difficult decision to get there. We talked about the size of the civil service to pay for it. That's the Conservative position. So we have funded this thing and will therefore do it. Labour says they, and no reason to doubt it, they've been solid in their support of Ukraine. But you can't carry on, as we've said we'll do, ensuring they have £3 billion a year for as long as this takes, if you're not prepared take the difficult decisions in order to fund that money. And so, as I say, I think in every way, security of this country, which starts with defence of the realm, is risked by a party coming into power, which is not prepared to say how it would pay for increasing defence budget, which must lead you to assume they may not. And actually, given that Keir Starmer stood on the most left-wing socialist platform to become leader, given that nearly 50 Labour MPs voted against our nuclear trident deterrent last time it came up for a vote, given he's got 4 members of his shadow cabinet who are against the nuclear deterrent when it was voted for, there are lots of reasons to doubt that they'll be secure for this country.
Mr. Shapps, some of our viewers were slightly alarmed the other day to see that a new website has popped up. I think it was the Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, who shared it. And this was a website where we're all being told to essentially hoard about 3 days' worth of tinned food and water in the case of an emergency. I mean, is there a possibility that there's going to be some kind of apocalypse? What's this for? What are we preparing for?
Look, I think the job of any government is to make sure that we are ready for all eventualities. And as we've seen in the last few years with COVID, with the war in Europe, actually with the conflict in the Middle East now, things can change. Sensibly, any government therefore does planning. And what the Deputy Prime Minister has done is brought together all the different departments that would have a stake in that. Ministry of Defence is one, of course, but also the security services, the Cabinet Office and many others, and thought about what we'd need to do under some more extreme circumstances. And that's not because we think that's about to happen, it's just sensible planning from any government. And I don't think anyone should be alarmed. I think people should actually feel reassured and more secure that we've got a government that actually bothers to take the time to do those things.
So we should all head to the supermarket and stock up on tinned soup and the like. But also, may I ask you, today, our Home and Security editor marked the 10,000th migrant crossing the Channel. That's a remarkable milestone. Your reaction, really? Over 10,000 people have crossed just this year. The Prime Minister says he wants to stop the boats.
Yeah, well, look, it shows how difficult this problem is and how determined you have to be. Last year, we got it down by over a third from the year before. But you've got to carry on making sure that you bust the criminal gangs that bring people illegally.
But the Defence Secretary, this year it's up by more than a third.
You've got to carry. I was going to the point I was going to make is these criminal gangs will exploit every possible loophole that they can. And what this government's been prepared to do is, frankly, have the guts to pass legislation to say, actually, if you come to this country in an illegal manner, then you will not get asylum. And then back that up by saying what will happen is you'll go to a third country, of course, in this case, Rwanda. And we want to see those planes leave for Rwanda. Labour, Starmer has fought tooth and nail to prevent it. We're trying to stop the boats. You're trying to stop the planes.
It doesn't suggest that you have a great deal of confidence in your Rwanda plan, that you're saying, of course, these planes will go off, but not until we all vote you back in. I mean, surely you can see that a cynical voter might think that that's a bit of a ploy.
I don't think anyone should be cynical about it. I was actually there at the press conference the day after we finally, against tooth and nail opposition from Labour, passed the Rwanda bill just a month or so ago. If you remember, the Prime Minister called a press conference and he said there and then the first flight, because you have to arrange it, make sure it's legal, all the rest, will be July. So there's no change to that. And actually, if we're voted back in, that's when they'll take off. Unfortunately, again, we've a clear plan, sometimes bold plan, like Rwanda, which look after our security. Look at what Labour's saying. Starmer is saying he wouldn't use the Rwanda plan, even if it works. Even if it works, he wouldn't use it.
Yeah, that's
Instead,
true.
He's going off to Europe, negotiating for 100,000 more asylum seekers to come here.
Labour deny that.
That is crazy.
And Mr. Shapps, why has David Frost, Lord Frost, been banned from standing at the next election as a Tory candidate?
So I'm not close to the detail of any of this, but what I can tell you is that to stand, you have to find a seat. I've been there myself in the past. You go around lots of different constituencies and you have to be selected by.
But he's claiming he's been banned, and he's awfully popular among the Tory membership.
Well, as I say, I'm not aware of any details on that. I do know that you have to actually get selected, and sometimes, having been, I think I went to about 19 different selections. So it can be a very long-winded process, I'm afraid.
Yes, it can be in normal time. Of course, in a snap election, very often it's the central party that then takes control, shortlists, less member involvement, and a lot of rumours about a lot of number 10 special advisers being found plum seats. I suppose we should be on the lookout for that. Would you be particularly surprised if various names that are cosy with various journalists and in with Mr Sunak get plum seats?
Well, look, I'm not, as I say, I'm not party chairman. I don't know. I once was party chairman. When I was, I made very clear that we shouldn't have a large cohort of special advisors. I want people who come through who have great experience of the world behind them and are able to bring things to Parliament. Special advisors can do that to an extent, but I think you want a mix of people coming into politics from all different walks of lives and backgrounds. So it certainly wasn't my approach. I'm not super close to the process, so I'm afraid I can't shed much light on your question itself.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Grant Shapps, MP, Defence Secretary, of course. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, let's go now to our political correspondent, Olivia Otley, who's listening to that interview with the Defence Secretary. And Olivia, how big of an issue do you think defence will be over the course of the next 6 weeks?
I think it actually will be a pretty big issue. The Conservatives are determined to make it a big issue. They see it as an issue where there is clear blue water between themselves and Labour. As Grant Shapps spelled out there, the Conservatives have committed to a 2.5% GDP increase in defence spending, whereas Labour have said that they would like to do it when economic conditions allow, which obviously doesn't mean very much at all. It is also an issue which is increasingly coming up at the very top of polls of what the people in the country care most about. Everyone is very aware that we are living in an increasingly less stable global environment with what's happening both in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe. And lots of people are putting security and safety and defence right at the top of their priority list. It is also an issue which can tend to favour the incumbent. People like the idea of, the person who is in charge already has the advantage of being seen as a statesman almost by definition. And so on issues of defence, these people, the incumbent who has relationships on the international stage, can often be at a little bit of an advantage. So the Conservatives will certainly try and put defence at the forefront of their election campaign. That said, there are plenty of Conservative backbenchers who are grumbling that actually 2.5 isn't enough. Ben Wallace, when he was Defence Secretary, he's leaving, but he does have a big following within the Conservative Party, wanted to raise defence spending to 3% of GDP, and the Conservatives have fallen short of doing that. And I think there are quite a lot of Conservative members who agree with Ben Wallace. So the Conservatives will try and make it front and centre of their election campaign, but there's a chance that might backfire among their own backbenchers.
Yes, and I wonder if there's a clear enough dividing line when it comes to the defence spending pledges, because, yes, the Conservatives say they are committed and they've outlined a way that they wish to pay for it. But Labour are still saying it's an ambition. Is there a big enough difference between those two positions for people to really, get a hold of this as an issue that they'd vote on?
Well, I think the Conservatives will have to do some sort of PR work, if you like, to prove that there is a difference. But, there is a difference. The Conservatives have laid out how they will pay for this to 2.5, well, the increase to 2.5% of GDP, whereas saying something is an ambition is political nonsense, really. When the economic conditions allow, that means it's not really a priority for Labour. So, if you just read it in a headline, then perhaps you might not understand the complexity, the difference as a just ordinary punter voting at the next election. But I think if the Conservatives continue to sort of big up that point, as we just saw Grant Shapps do there, it will sort of filter through as a dividing line between the two parties.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Olivia Otley, our political correspondent there in Westminster. Let's cross over to Eastbourne to listen to the Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey.
The Liberal Democrats certainly won't prep up the Conservatives. They need to leave government. They're out of ideas, out of excuses, out of time, and they need to be out of office. They've undermined our country. But Liberal Democrats have a set of really positive ideas. We call it our fair deal for people. People who've been working hard, paying their taxes, playing by the rules, looking after loved ones, who just had a really tough time under the Conservatives. And I want to put the Liberal Democrat ideas there, because I think our ideas are fresh, fresh. I think they would transform our country and actually transform our politics. We're very different from any other party.
Notice you don't want to talk about a coalition with Labour.
Well, I'm talking about this election campaign. When I'm knocking on doors, what people say to me and say to other Liberal Democrat canvassers, what are you going to do about the health service in our local area? What are you going to do about the problem of the water company pumping their filthy sewage onto our beaches, into our rivers? What are you going to do about the cost of living? And we are going to focus on that. I make no apology for that. It's an election campaign, and I want to tell people what Liberal Democrats stand for.
OK, quick question about what you're announcing today on GPs. You're promising 8,000 new GPs within the next 5 years. 4,000 of those you're going to entice to stay within the NHS, as well as 4,000 extra ones being recruited. It's something the Tories have promised to do since 2019. They didn't get very far with their target. How do you think you're going to do things differently? What sort of temptations are you going to offer GPs who want to leave to actually come back into this system?
Well, Liberal Democrats want many GPs, you're right, because people are waiting far too long for GP appointments, and the GPs are working really hard. They're just overstretched, just not enough GPs. So our programme is really ambitious. We've worked it through with health experts. It's going to cost £1 billion a year for the next 4 years, and we think over the next Parliament we could deliver 8,000 more GPs, so people can get an appointment really quickly. We're going to legislate once we've done this and we've got more GPs, so that people have a right to see a GP within 7 days or 24 hours if it's an emergency. And our package of training more people, retaining more people, encouraging people back with this commitment of £4 billion over the next Parliament, I think is a serious one. It's way more effective and thought through than anything the Conservatives have done. The Conservatives promised it and failed to deliver.
OK, quick question on the energy price cap, which has obviously come down today. You're promising to get people's energy bills down further. How?
Well, 2 ways. First of all, we want a proper windfall tax on the huge profits of the oil and gas companies. It was Liberal Democrats who came up with that idea in the first place. I'm afraid Rishi Sunak and Conservatives didn't do it properly, and so they didn't get the money to be able to give real help to people, and that's what we want to do. And in addition to that, we want to make sure that insulating people's homes is done far more quickly and far more effectively, because then they don't have to use so much energy and the bills come down. And we want to invest in renewables, the cheapest, most popular form of energy, and Liberal Democrats have the best record of any political party for that. So we have a whole package to reduce energy bills, and I'm afraid the government have failed drastically on energy bills. Everybody knows that.
Quick question from some of my colleagues. What is your reaction to Jeremy Corbyn standing as an independent candidate in Islington against the Labour Party? Do you think that's destabilising for Labour at this point?
Well, I think it's for Labour to comment on that. It's clearly an internal Labour argument. All I know is Liberal Democrats have a great candidate in Islington North, Vikas Agarwal. I've worked with him. He would be a brilliant MP.
OK, just finally.
That was the Liberal Democrat leader, Ed Davey, being pressed on some of his pledges.
In sunny Eastbourne, on the beach.
It's a lovely day out there today.
Now, I think the last time he was in Eastbourne, or at least one of the earlier times that he was in Eastbourne back in September, he ended up falling into the sea when trying to do a stunt on a boat with a local candidate. And there he was, completely sodden, but not today.
Do you know who the Liberal Democrat candidate for Islington North is? Come on, Tom, you're usually a stato.
I don't. Who is?
Well, I don't know. I was asking you.
Well, maybe we should have prepared that before we started doing it on live television.
Well, if anyone at home knows, I mean, we can always Google it, I guess.
Well, I'll do that right now.
Tapping away. Tapping. He'll find out for us.
Yeah.
Yes, but apparently, according to Ed Davey, they've got a fantastic candidate to go up against Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour candidate.
Vikas
It could get interesting, that seat. Who?
Vikas Agarwal.
Well, there you go. Soon a household name, I'm sure. But in other news, GBNews can confirm that earlier this afternoon, the number of migrants arriving in the UK illegally via small boat from France has now reached and surpassed 10,000 people.
Well, let's go to our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who's in Dover for us, gone from one part of the South Coast to another part of the South Coast. And, Mark, the sea is just as beautiful behind you as it was behind Sir Ed Davey.
Yeah, I can confirm it's just as lovely here in Dover as it is down in Eastbourne, and that's brought, of course, the inevitable surge in Channel migrant crossings again today. Another 3 boats bringing 154 people across to UK waters and here to the border force processing centre at Dover Harbour. Now, that takes the total who've arrived so far this year to 10,036. And that, of course, is that landmark figure of 10,000 reached earlier in the year than it was last year, a full month earlier than it was last year. In fact, we are 35% ahead on the figures last year in terms of those arriving, and last year they'd made 36% gains in the number of small boats and migrants who were stopping. So effectively a full reversal of the situation last year. That gives you an indication perhaps of one of the key positive advantages for Rishi Sunak in bringing that election forward and coming on the 4th of July rather than waiting until the back end of the year when we have the likelihood of a real summer surge. It's being predicted by Border Force officials that we will have many thousands of migrants arriving as we get to the flat calm conditions out in the English Channel, where you can get on occasions 1,000 or more arriving on a single day. And I think going to the country after a summer surge like that could be a very difficult message to sell.
A flight might take off before the election. I'm sure Rishi Sunak would love that.
Well, I mean, it's possible he might pull a rabbit out of the hat and you might get 1 or 2 Rwanda flights going off. But he used his first round of interviews yesterday since that shock election announcement to indicate really that there wouldn't be any flights taking off, that he was preparing the groundwork, that if a Conservative government is returned by the electorate, then immediately after that those flights would take off. One advantage again, of course, of going early is even if they get 1 or 2 flights off, they don't then have to or wouldn't have the time to demonstrate that it has proved to be the deterrent that the Prime Minister has been telling us for many months he knows it will be. One of the disadvantages, obviously, in leaving it until, say, a November election is if those flights did get off the ground, and many flights got off the ground, and yet we still had a bumper year of arrivals, then that would be pretty disastrous for the government's Stop the Boats campaign.
It is, I suppose, a real conundrum, therefore. Perhaps it leads to the assumption that Rishi Sunak doesn't, after all, believe in the Rwanda policy. That's the line from Labour, that Sunak has never believed in the policy. Do you think that there is something to that, or could it be that the reason Rishi Sunak wants this election and wants a new mandate with Rwanda this time in the manifesto is that manifesto commitments can ride through the House of Lords in the way that commitments that weren't in manifestos can't?
Well, that's certainly one advantage. You're absolutely right there. I do think that the Prime Minister believes in the Rwanda plan, and one of the key reasons that I think that this government is committed to the Rwanda plan is not just necessarily hooked to small boats. It offers a potential solution to what you do with those migrants who have no right to remain here in the UK. And it doesn't mean it's migrants who have come across on small boats. They could have arrived by other means. It could be student visa overstayers or foreign national offenders who can't be returned to their home country because it's too dangerous to do that. Rwanda is that, according to the government, safe third country that allows the option of where to send these individuals to, and that's why now you have 15 other countries who've signed up to exploring that very issue of safe third countries as a potential way around it. And it's, as I was saying yesterday, it is a clear dividing line between the Conservatives and Labour going forward in this election, and one that I'm sure Rishi Sunak and the Tories are up for in terms of the fight, because I think they do believe that they have a stronger message to the electorate on migration than the Labour Party have.
Yes, it's just a difficulty for them that so few, well, not very many people trust that this plan is going to work. But if they can turn that around, it could be a vote winner. Thank you very much indeed, Mark White, our Home and Security Editor there in Dover. Now, coming up, this is an interesting one.
An unusual one. The first millennial, otherwise known as God's influencer, is set to become the first millennial to be made a saint. What on earth is this about? And how do we get in? Well, that's after this.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The most sexiest man in the UK at the moment, as voted for by a dating website, is that man on your screen, Jeremy Clarkson. I'm sorry, Peter, I know he's a man of a certain age, but I'm not getting this one.
Are you not?
No.
This is another reason for an old wrinkly like me to be deeply joyous. Hope springs eternal. He's grey-haired, he's balding, he's got a bit of a pot belly, he's quite tall. You know, I reckon I might be in with half a shower.
As long as only hope springing eternal, love. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of guys watching this will really be a bit befuddled as to how he's the sexiest guy. I think it's a sympathy vote.
No, I get it. I understand it.
But he's got a sense of humour, and he's got plenty of money.
But what's there to understand? How is he the sexiest man?
I'll tell you why. Because he's and I say this as a bloke, he's a man's man. He gets stuck in, he's involved, he's practical, he's physical.
Does that make him
funny,
sexy, though?
He's got money. I think men these days, if you ask me, too effeminate. And women don't want that. Women, well, I don't know what...
What do women want? Go on, just mansplain what women want. Go on, thank you very much. No, this is voted for by, it's an illicit dating website, OK?
Oh, is it an affairs website?
Married women. But Idris Elba came third.
I just think Jez he's a man's man. Like I said, he's physical, he gets involved, he likes a beer, he's got plenty of money. How much did he get for the farm on Amazon?
That's so silly. So you're implying women only go for men with money?
Well, no, but I mean...
He did, didn't he? Just said that, yeah. He's got plenty of money, so it's sexy.
It's normal for women to want to be with a man who can look after them, no?
No. Will you stop mansplaining what women want?
My mum had an expression, Ben. She said, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. But trust me, if Idris Elba gets himself a pair of wellies, he'll be second next year.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain, 27 minutes past 2. Some breaking news now on the ICJ's ruling on Israel's Rafah offensive. Well, this international court has ordered Israel to halt its offensive.
Yes, now the ICJ is the top UN court, isn't it? And they can make these technically legally binding rulings.
Only if you're a party to the court.
Only if you're a party to the court. But yes, it has little in the way of enforcement powers. But they've made this statement. They have ordered Israel to halt its offensive in Rafah. So there you go. That's the breaking news from the International Court of Justice. This is all relating to South Africa's request to order a halt on this particular offensive in Gaza. They ordered it as an emergency measure. Well, they asked the ICJ to order it as an emergency measure. They're claiming that Israel's actions amount to genocide in Gaza. And so the ICJ has now ruled that the offensive should be halted.
Now, it's important to make clear the ICJ is a separate institution from the ICC. So the International Court of Justice is about states taking on states, an arbitration mechanism there, whereas the International Criminal Court, which issued arrest warrants for the leaders of Hamas as well as the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just last week, that is a separate institution that goes after individuals. This is an institution that talks about states.
Well, we'll bring you more as we get it, but that is the breaking news there. Now,
and I think the chances that Israel will listen to the ICJ, pretty much zero.
And limited, if any, enforcement powers. But there you go, that's the ruling. Now, a London-born teenager, in very different news, is set to become the first millennial to be made a saint after a second miracle was attributed to him by Pope Francis.
How convenient. During his short life, Carlo Acutis was known as God's influencer, as he used his computer skills to spread the Catholic faith before tragically dying of leukemia in 2005 when aged just 15.
Yes, well, let's discuss this further with Associate Editor of the Catholic Herald, Dr. Gavin Ashenden. Gavin, how does one become a saint?
Well, I heard Tom say how convenient with a sort of degree of scepticism.
Yes.
And so I think Tom's scepticism is perfectly justified. Catholic Church is very cautious about being taken for a ride. And we have a long history of this at Lourdes, where there are extraordinary miracles. There's a very serious medical commission set up to examine every miracle. But what happens is, from time to time, we're bowled over because the miracles appear to happen. They get tested. And so Catholics believe in praying for help with people who've lived holy lives. And two people asked the prayers of Carlo Acutis, this saint in sneakers, who led the most extraordinary life until he died when he was 15. And the two of them are a Brazilian boy who had breathing difficulties and vomited all the time, and a Costa Rican girl, age 11, who had a very serious brain hemorrhage. They both found themselves in life-threatening positions. And when prayers were addressed to Carlo, they miraculously got better. So the doctor said, this is not this is not medical science. When these things are tested, then Catholics say, well, hooray, someone's got some leverage here. So it's all part of the attempt to change human nature, to save the world and to bring people to Jesus.
Oh, Fred, I was brought up a bit too Protestant for all of this. I'm not sure. I mean, is there... I mean...
So was I, Tom. So was I. So I understand where you're coming from.
Yes, because you're a convert to Catholicism.
Yeah.
What was it that made you switch?
So you see, it was a thing that Carlo Acutis got excited about. He made a whole list as a computer geek of all the Eucharistic miracles. So what Catholics say, and what I thought was baloney for years, was that a change actually happens in the Mass. And I thought, this is complete nonsense, for goodness sake. It's the 20th century. But there have been two miracles, one in 1994, where they took the host that bled to a laboratory in New York, and they said to the guy, what is this stuff? And he said, it's human white blood cells. And so science, which has been
you're talking about transubstantiation?
Yeah, I am. I'm saying the hosts bleed some of the hosts bleed, and when they're tested by scientific laboratories, they turn out to have white living blood cells. And so
I would be very interested to have this independently verified.
It is independent, but this is independent verification. That's the whole point. This was the Jewish scientist in New York who tested this in 1994 was a Jewish atheist. He became a Catholic on the spot.
Has anyone been able to replicate that?
Yes, of course, lots of times, 5 or 6 times since it happened in '94.
Well, hang on. If this is because the scientific method is you don't believe something until you can prove it.
Right.
Whereas the religious faith is about having faith in something, not necessarily needing proof. But you seem to be making a scientific argument here, not a religious one.
Tom, I am. Thank you for being so alert. That's exactly what I'm doing. So my faith has been a working hypothesis. After all, who would become a Christian unnecessarily? Who would believe in miracles unnecessarily and be taken for a dork? You know, it's a working hypothesis. Try it out, test it. Try it out, test it. It's the same hypothesis for religion as for science. And here, so what Carlo got so excited about was that these Eucharistic miracles that have been tested independently by scientific laboratories saying transubstantiation happens, it's all out there, but nobody talks about it. So this wonderful computer geek made a whole list and said, let's talk about it. I'm so glad we are. This is what he wanted.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us with such passion as well. Dr. Gavin Ashenden, Associate Editor of the Catholic Herald. Tom, you shouldn't be so sure about these things. You know what? Your scepticism, you don't know everything.
I don't know everything, which is why I'm so sceptical to believe certain things that are told to me.
It's easy to be a sceptic.
But I do really appreciate Dr. Ashenden talking through that, because I know to a lot of people it does mean a lot, but just not really to me.
Well, coming up, we're live at a D-Day torchlighting ceremony. We're going to be hearing from a D-Day veteran. That's after your headlines, so stick with us.
It's 2:33. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister says the lowering of the price cap shows his plan is working as both parties look to make energy policy an electoral dividing line. Rishi Sunak completed his tour of the nation in Northern Ireland earlier and claimed the economy's turned a corner. He criticised the cost of Labour's net zero pledges and said he'll be telling voters over the next few weeks how the Conservatives plan to secure Britain's future.
Inflation has fallen back to normal levels. The economy grew faster than all our competitors at the beginning of this year. Today we've had the news that energy bills are falling again and wages have been rising faster than prices for almost a year now. And that's why it's the right time to turn to the future. And the world is sadly a more uncertain place than it's been in decades. And that's why what the country needs is leadership that can provide bold action and that has a clear plan, because that's how we will deliver a secure future for everyone in our country.
Well, Labour's confirmed it would pass the smoking ban if the party enters office, with the Conservatives having run out of time to get it through Parliament. The Labour leader is campaigning in Scotland today, where he's pledged to bring down energy costs with a new publicly owned green power company. He's told an event in Glasgow only Labour can stop the chaos. His party's hoping to win dozens of seats in Scotland after years of SNP dominance. GB News can exclusively reveal more than 10,000 Channel migrants have crossed illegally to the UK this year. It's a blow to Rishi Sunak on his second full day of election campaigning after he promised his government would stop the boats. The number of people sleeping rough has doubled since 2010, despite the Conservative Party's promise to solve the crisis. The government published a strategy to tackle a growing problem 2 years ago, reiterating its manifesto commitment from the last election. Housing organisation Shelter, though, says homelessness is a political choice and has called on MPs to do more to tackle it. We can get more on our stories by scanning the QR code on your screen for GB News alerts. Details also on the website.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It will be a cloudy day for most of us through the rest of the day. However, some sunshine will break out across the south potentially later on today. In the north, though, drizzly rain for many areas. That's because we've still got this area of low pressure. This is the same area of low pressure that has brought very recent heavy rainfall to many northern areas. And so it will stay quite cloudy across the north and the west in particular, where drizzly rain will persist over the high ground and across coastal areas, and it will still feel fairly cool for the time of year up here. However, further south, particularly into the afternoon, there's a chance of some sunny breaks, highs of around 20 degrees across the south and east and into the high teens for many southern areas. So fairly pleasant in the sunshine, but for most of us, still a bit of a disappointing feeling day for this point in May. So by the end of the afternoon, we'll see quite a lot of clouds still across much of Scotland and some drizzly rain as well. As I said, it's most likely over the higher ground into Northern Ireland as well, parts of Cumbria, the southwest of Scotland too. Temperatures around 13 or 14 degrees to end the day. Further south, though, will start to turn a bit drier. That dry weather pushing further north into much of Wales and the Midlands as well. And it will turn drier and clearer as the night goes on, as that area of low pressure pushes further north, taking that clearer weather further north with it as well. So a fairly clear night. We could see some mist and fog developing for many southern areas where the ground is wet from the recent rainfall. But across the far north, some drizzly rain will continue across northern Scotland. But it's going to be a much cooler start to the day on Saturday. However, it will be a much brighter day as well, so it should warm up quite quickly. As I said, some early mist and fog to start the day, but plenty of sunshine across the UK. Saturday's looking like the best day of the bank holiday weekend. The afternoons will be a little bit cloudier, and there's a chance of a few showers across parts of England and Wales and potentially the southeast later on in the day. But in the sunshine, there'll be highs of 22 degrees. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. A couple of collisions on the northbound M1. Firstly, in West Yorkshire from Ossett at 40 to Cargate Junction 41. 2 lanes combed off and causing queues. Queuing to a lane shut northbound Junction 29A. That's Bolsover up towards Sheffield South at Junction 30. A lane shut too on the other side. It's in the roadworks, that northbound queue back towards Chesterfield now at Junction 29. Now elsewhere, anti-clock M25. A couple of issues. There's a broken down lorry. A lane shut at Enfield 25, a lane shut too on the exit slip queuing back to Waltham Abbey, also anti-clock just after Chertsey at 11, queuing back to 12, a lane out, a lorry having a tyre change. Eastbound M4 away from Swansea, 43 to 42 towards the Britain Ferry Bridge, a lane shut in queues for a collision.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
.39, you're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain, and it is Martin Daubney up next at 3 o'clock. He joins us now, as always. Martin, what's coming up on your show for us today?
Well, fantastic show as ever from you guys. It's bedlam on the general election trail. 75 stand-downs amongst the Tory ranks now, equalling that grim 1997 total. Does that signify a Blair-style wipeout? Plus, earlier on we reported Lord Frost had been frozen out, Mr Brexit put away and not allowed to stand in 93 vacant Tory seats. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has just revealed to GB News that's not true. We'll have the full inside story on that. Plus, Corbyn, chaos in Islington North as the Labour Party tears itself apart. And talking of which, is the party over for Reform UK? Their talismanic leader, Nigel Farage, is going to America. I'll have the party leader, Richard Tice, in the studio, and I'll put it to him. Is the party over for Reform UK? That's coming up 3 till 6.
Oh, very interesting.
Looking forward to that. I know that that the Prime Minister has, in the last couple of minutes, as you have just said, been contradicting the accounts that was told to Christopher Hope over David Frost. It seems like this is a row that is just starting in the last couple of minutes and could really be a blazing row. We'll look forward to hearing all of that in full from you from 3.
Well, there's Martin. He's, taking his thing out, getting on his way.
Well, he's got a show to prepare. He's got a show to prepare. There's news that's happening.
There's news
Never
happening
stops.
Now.
Never stops.
This row.
Well, we're going to see if we can get Christopher Hope up very, very soon to talk through precisely what's going on. Have there been Conservative candidates blocked from taking on some of those seats? And is Lord Frost, David Frost, the former Brexit negotiator, among them?
Or is it a whole hoo-ha over nothing? We'll find out. We will find out.
But of course, we're approaching the 80th anniversary of the D-Day.
It's been a long week. It's been a long week. Please forgive us.
Yeah, well, that was, of course, the beginning of the end of the Second World War in 1944, as Allied troops retook at first France and then all of Europe from the grip of Nazi Germany.
Yes, to mark the occasion, various events have been taking place across the UK, including one lighting their legacy torch event in Harrogate today.
Well, our reporter Anna Riley was there. She joins us now. And Anna, what's this event all about?
Good afternoon to you both. Well, this event is put on by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. The Lighting Their Legacy event is all about passing down the stories of World War II, the veterans' stories and what they went through to the younger generation. So we're here at Stonefall Cemetery in Harrogate. It's one of the largest Commonwealth war graves in the north of England, with over 900 Commonwealth war graves from people mainly from Canada and America. So this morning there was the lighting of the light that's been passed across the UK. Next week it's going to be in Manchester and in Edinburgh, and it's been in the south of England so far. And the event was led by the Commonwealth War Grave Commission, but a special guest of honour that was here was Ken Cook, a 98-year-old veteran that was there for the D-Day landings. This is what he had to say.
What was it like? Now, there's loads of explanations of what it was like. For some, it was terrible. For some, it was an adventure. For me, it was that kind of adventure, like a Boy Scout adventure. Never been on a beach before. Never seen a ship before. Because I was born in a mining village in Nottinghamshire, nowhere near the coast where I could go to go on a beach or whatever. And I never seen a ship or a boat, even a rowing boat I never seen. So all this was brand new to me. It was, you know, exciting in a way, but otherwise, you know, it's just something that happened. I was there, and in my mind, it was an adventure.
Ken was just 18 years old when he was conscripted to join the army. He did his training in Richmond, nearby here in North Yorkshire, and he just described to school children from a local primary school here in Harrogate about what he saw during those D-Day landings and his time in the army fighting in World War II for that ending of the war in 1945. So yeah, this event, as I mentioned, is going to be continuing on to next week, and Ken will be going over to Normandy with other veterans on the 6th of June, and they will be taking the light that they've been lighting all around the UK across on the ferry to Normandy as the final stop for that D-Day 80 memorial.
Fitting memorial following that journey that was made by so many brave Brits, Canadians, Americans, so many that retook and reclaimed the freedom of this continent. Really appreciate your time. Thanks, Anna Riley, for bringing us that.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Now, coming up, our pubs killing our spirits ahead of the FA Cup final this weekend. Find out why after this short break.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Emma, let's start, shall we, with Prince William confirming on the Isles of Scilly yesterday that Kate is doing well. I thought it was a very brave lady to say, "Are we allowed to ask how the Princess of Wales is?" And I thought, well, we're not, so good for you.
Yeah. One of the hospitals he visited on the Isles of Scilly, an administrator, a hospital administrator, asked him how Kate was doing, and he said, "She's doing well, thanks."
Until we hear official word from the palace, then we're just going to have to rely on little snippets like this.
It does seem to be serious. So,
it does.
Again, we wish her
What's
very
quite telling as well, I went through some of the social media comments on this, and people that live on the Isle of Scilly were just saying how close they got, how wonderful it was. He's supporting local businesses, and that pasty shop will now be like treasured, you know, forever. That people forever go there.
On the Quay. It sounds great. It's called On the Quay.
Compare and contrast with this "I feel at home in Nigeria" vibe that Meghan's putting out. Two very, very different takes on how to be a royal.
Do they want to be royals or do they not? Because they seem to want sort of half the trappings but without all the kind of responsibilities.
These two brothers, who obviously went through a lot growing up, obviously can't stand the sight of each other right now, and it's just really sad.
Well, it goes beyond the brothers. I mean, we are told from some of the papers this morning that the King didn't have time in his schedule to see his son because he was actually meeting David Beckham for a private meeting.
Well, who would you choose?
I mean, I know I
It's all about priorities.
But, you know, you surely, I mean, you could just pop in as well. I reckon that Harry and Bex are pals, probably. So what's gone on there, and will they ever be able to repair things?
And they really were so close. I mean, when you compare the Buckingham Palace garden party, a couple of miles down the road, literally Harry was at Westminster or wherever it was. It wasn't far. And it absolutely would have been possible for him to go.
3 miles apart, and yet absolutely worlds apart in terms of their emotional state.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 2:48 in the afternoon, and are pubs killing our spirits? Punters, they're reportedly being overcharged around £114 a year, Tom.
That's at least 2 pints. That was an inflation joke. But yes, no, punters are being overcharged around £114 a year because pubs are short measuring their beer and wine.
Apparently so. Now, according to research by the Chartered Trading Standards Institute, that's the watchdog, really, 7 out of 10 drinks in UK pubs are poured short. This is an outrage. Beer is the most likely drink to be underpoured, although I think I've been served a glass of wine or two that's been underpoured.
So, is there a solution? Or are we just expected to grin and bear it? Or do we need to be less British about it and actually drop the stiff upper lip and just ask for a little top-up? Well, let's speak to our GB News West Midlands reporter, Jack Carlson, who's at the Queen's Head pub in Birmingham. Jack, you're behind the bar. Take it away.
Well, if this is proper investigative journalism, Tom and Emily, really. There might be an election going on, but this is the story that's on everyone's lips today, of course, that Trading Standards report to say that people are being shortchanged at the bar, not getting a full pint when they come to the pub. So to find out really all about that and what really should be a proper good pint and a proper good pour, we're here with Harry Higgs, who's the Brand and Compliance Manager for Davenport's brewery. Harry, just give a bit of reaction, really, to that report today.
Yeah, so it's quite shocking, obviously. We at Davenport's really emphasise that customers have value for money, so we make sure things like that we do a proper pint pour every single time. So I'm quite shocked that it's actually happening across the industry.
Well, you're going to show us exactly how to pour a pint. We've got some of your Gold Ale on tap here. Why don't you take it away and just kind of tell us as you're doing it then, when you're pouring a pint, what should it look like? How should it be served?
Okay, so the first part is that you need to make sure that your glassware is actually what we call beer clean. So there's nothing wrong with the glass, that it will not affect the taste or flavour of the beer and ensure that perfect pour. Then the first initial pour that you do with a cask ale is one speedy, steady hand pour, and then you just keep pouring it up with the nozzle at the bottom, ensuring that the aeration throughout the beer is full and keeps the flow of the beer throughout the head. Then you leave it to settle for 90 seconds. That allows it to cascade down, and all that little magic of molten hops is going on right there. Once you're happy with that, make sure that you top it back up to what we and the brewers Association recommend, which is a 95% liquid, i.e. the beer, and the 5% head retention. Now, that's a recommendation of it's a minimum. So if a customer wants it topped up, you should top it up all the time. You'll especially find that down south where they like it with very, very little head, unlike the northeast that like a lot of head. But it's customer's always right? So we pour it to how we believe, and the brewers believe that it's the perfect pint. But if a customer wants it to their taste, we should do it that way.
Why don't we do the big reveal then of the pint you have poured absolutely magnificently? There we go. Take a look at that. And while I have an investigative taste test, why don't you tell us again? So it's very much about the technique then. So this kind of report that people are being shortchanged because they're not getting a full pint is because really about the technique of how it's poured.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything more easy. I don't think there's anything dishonest about it. I think it's just through lack of training and skill knowledge and everything like that. Within hospitality, everything is taught from your elders, if you like. So the way that you pour a pint and everything like that is done from the very first person that trained you, and that kind of sticks with you. So if we haven't got those fundamentals of training and ensuring that that it's delivered right to the first time that you come into the industry, you're always going to pour that wrong. That's why in Dunport we really do invest time on like the perfect beer pour and beer knowledge and everything like that to ensure that we pour the perfect pint every single time.
Well, there we go. Well, that is the ultimate opinion then of the man that has to do it every day, and that's a pretty good poured pint. Maybe if I didn't spill so many, it would be a full one. But bottoms up, Tom and Emily.
Oh, marvellous stuff, Jack. Thank you so much for bringing us that. It takes me back to my days behind a bar. Do I ever mention that? But I should note it. I should
Do you
say
think it makes
that,
you more man of the people, Tom?
No, not at all. Lord Sharp, who certainly is a man of the people, he's just announced this new law that allows pubs to stay open late if England or Scotland get through to the semis in the Euros. And what he said in the House of Lords just now is, get properly on the lash. So you have it there from Lord Sharp. Get properly on the lash.
It's not very often that politicians tell us to drink more. But there you go. He's not trying to ban booze. He's not trying to slap more taxes on it. So there you go. Yes, I do hope everyone has a lovely time this weekend. And if it involves a pint for the FA Cup final, then, you know, enjoy it. There's always non-alcoholic versions too.
That's very true. Very true. Well, thank you so much for your company. Of course, up next is Martin Daubney, and our coverage continues next week.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. There will be some sunshine across southern areas to end the day, but for most of us it will stay rather cloudy, and it's going to be quite a cold night tonight as well, particularly compared to recent nights. Drizzly rain is going to continue across northern areas. That's because low pressure is still nearby and a weather front, but through this evening that low pressure will gradually shift north and westwards, taking with it that cloudier and slightly wetter weather and introducing much clearer weather. The clearer skies from the south this afternoon will spread northwards, and that will allow for temperatures to dip down into single figures, possibly low single figures across southern counties. There could also be some mist and fog around as well first thing, but also quite a good deal of sunshine as well. Saturday is looking like the driest day of the weekend and the warmest one as well. So fairly bright start across the far north of Scotland. Still some lingering rain across the northwest and the southwest probably, but for most of us it should be dry, if not a bit cloudy, across northern areas. Across northern England, much of Wales and England, it should be a bright start. Temperatures will pick up quite quickly as the sun comes up, so you'll be into double digits at least by around 8 o'clock, and there'll be plenty of sunshine through the morning. That mist and fog should clear quite quickly. There's a potential for a few showers to develop, particularly across northern areas of England. Parts of Scotland as well could see some heavier showers on Saturday, but most of us should stay dry, and there's just a chance of some rain clipping the far southeast later on in the day. But in the sunshine, highs of around 22 degrees in the south into the high teens across the north. But there is a bit of a change on the way for Sunday, as this area of rain from the southwest will push north-eastwards through the night, bringing a spell of wet weather. And once it does clear through, we will see plenty of showers breaking out across the country through Sunday and Monday. These could be quite heavy, possibly thundery, so it's going to turn much more unsettled and a little bit cooler for the rest of the weekend.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Oh my God, are you joking? Not a wine, what is it? I never won a penny in my life.
I don't know what to say.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life. Oh my God. Oh God. Oh, it shocks me. This is amazing.
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you and a very happy Friday. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, with Sir John Redwood and Bionic MP Craig McKinley, the latest Tories to bow out of the election. The Conservative exodus is now 75, equalling the grim record of 1997. Does this signify a Blair-style wipeout for Rishi Sunak's Conservatives? And next story, we broke the news this morning that Lord Frost, Boris Johnson's Mr Brexit, had been sensationally barred from standing in any of the 93 vacant seats that currently don't have a Tory candidate. But Rishi Sunak has since denied that exclusively to us. Stand by for some fighting talk from the Prime Minister. And next up, former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has dramatically announced that he will stand as an independent in Islington North, leaving Keir Starmer no option but to boot him out, finally, of the Labour Party. And there's the rest of the day's news away from the general election as well, because in the past few hours, the 10,000th small boat Migrant to arrive this year landed in Britain. Mark Wyatt will join us live from Dover to discuss this stark landmark. And that's all coming up between now and 4 o'clock. Well, the show, always a delight to have your company. It's bedlam on the election trail. Already chaos in the Conservatives. There's 75 people standing down now. And Lord Frost, this dramatic news, he'd been frozen out. Mr Brexit no longer welcome. The Prime Minister has since denied that. We'll have that exclusive coming up soon. Plus, Corbyn got finally kicked out of Labour. And at 5 o'clock, beg your pardon, I'll be joined by Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform Party, after a dramatic week that saw Nigel Farage pull out and then get back in on the election trail and then say he was going to America. What's the truth? What's going on in Reform? And is the party over for Reform UK? I'll have their leader here in the studio to put that to him directly. But first, get in touch with your views, and it's gbnews.com/you'll say. That's the way to do it. But first, it's your headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 3:02. I'm Aaron Armstrong. The Prime Minister says a fall in the price cap is further evidence his plan is working, as both parties put energy at the centre of their electoral campaigns. Rishi Sunak completed his tour of the nation in Northern Ireland earlier and claimed the economy's turned a corner. He criticised the cost of Labour's net zero pledges and says he'll be telling voters over the next few weeks how the Conservatives plan to secure Britain's future.
Inflation has fallen back to normal levels. The economy grew faster than all our competitors at the beginning of this year. Today we've had the news that energy bills are falling again and wages have been rising faster than prices for almost a year now. And that's why it's the right time to turn to the future. And the world is sadly a more uncertain place than it's been in decades. And that's why what the country needs is leadership that can provide bold action and that has a clear plan, because that's how we will deliver a secure future for everyone in our country.
Well, Labour has ruled out any deals with the SNP after the election, even in the event of a hung Parliament. Sir Keir Starmer is campaigning in Glasgow's East today, one of the seats he's hoping to take from John Swinney's party in July's election. Sir Keir says the SNP's only ambition is to break up the UK, and there would be absolutely no deal with the Scottish nationalists. Jeremy Corbyn's confirmed he'll stand as an independent candidate in the general election against the party he once led. As a result, he's automatically been expelled as a member of Labour, which suspended him in 2020 over complaints of anti-Semitism in the party had been, in his words, dramatically overstated for political reasons. The former Labour leader says he'll run as a voice for equality, democracy and peace. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says he's not worried about Corbyn's popularity in Islington North, which he's represented since 1983.
Jeremy Corbyn will make his own decisions. I think he's standing as an independent. That's his choice. We will have an excellent Labour candidate in Islington North, as we've got excellent Labour candidates across the country. And the choice at this election is absolutely clear. We've had 14 years of chaos and decline under this Tory government. We cannot have more of that.
GB News can exclusively reveal more than 10,000 Channel migrants have crossed illegally to the UK so far this year. The milestone figure was reached today after another 154 people arrived in Dover, having crossed in 3 small boats this morning. The latest arrivals will be a blow to Rishi Sunak on his second full day of campaigning. He's promised his government will stop the boats. The former boss of the Post Office has been accused of living in La La Land over her role in the Horizon scandal. Paula Venables again became emotional on her third day of giving evidence. She's admitted making mistakes and accepted there's no one else to blame, but claimed her only motivation was for the best of the Post Office and its hundreds of sub-postmasters, adding she didn't know why important information didn't reach her. Sam Stein, KC, described that as absolute rubbish and suggested Ms Venables had failed to ask the right questions because the risk was too great.
I worked as hard as I possibly could to deliver the best post office for the UK. It would have been wonderful to have 30,000 post office branches. That would have been the best outcome ever, to have had more post offices in more communities. What I failed to do, and I have made this clear previously, is I did not recognise and it's been discussed across the inquiry, the imbalance of power between the institution and the individual, and I let these people down.
The number of people sleeping rough has doubled since 2010, despite the Conservative Party's promise to solve the crisis. The government published a strategy to tackle the growing problem 2 years ago, reiterating its manifesto commitment from the last election. But since then, the problem's got worse. Housing organisation Shelter says homelessness is a political choice and has called on MPs to do more to tackle it. And if you found the rising price of drinks difficult to swallow recently, this may make matters worse. An investigation by Trading Standards has found almost 90% of beer in pubs they surveyed is being short-measured, and 43% of wine. Officers visited 77 pubs across the country and were served 96 short measures out of 137 orders. That's more than two-thirds. It equates to £88 a year for the average beer drinker and £114 a year for those who drink wine. Well, for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. The QR code's on your screen. The details are on the website. And now it's back to Martin.
Thank you, Aaron. Now let's start with the latest on another hectic day of general election campaigning, and the great Tory exodus has now equalled the record set in 1997. A massive 75 Conservative MPs will not fight the election on the 4th of July, and Craig McKinley, who only returned to Parliament, if you recall, bravely 2 days ago after having his arms and legs amputated, will bow out as the MP for South Thanet. Of the high-profile Tories, Sir John Redwood and Greg Clark are also quitting the party. Well, GB News' political editor Christopher Hope has spent the day with Rishi Sunak, and he joins me now. Chris, welcome to the show. Before we turn to the great Tory exodus, Chris, you broke a story earlier on today about Lord Frost being frozen out of the Tory party. You got an update for me. What is it?
That's right. Friends of Lord Frost do insist he has been told he is off the candidates list. He's approved, but is passed to go forward to try and get selected by all these 93 or so associations that have yet to find a candidate in the Tory party for the July 4th election. That's been deferred for a future date. There's a meeting next Tuesday or Wednesday when that might be brought back. But as things stand, he is not allowed to stand as a candidate in the coming up election. This has been denied, though, by the Prime Minister, the guy in charge of the party. He has told GB News and other broadcasters on a flight from Northern Ireland to the West Midlands just a moment ago, said in terms, David Frost has not been blocked from standing as a candidate at the election in July. That's just not right. The protest started on Wednesday night. He hasn't been blocked. And he says, you know, I'm a low-tax Brexiteer like David Frost. So there's some dispute here. There's no question friends of David Frost insist he is blocked. The PM says otherwise. That's what he said was on the plane over just now.
Again, Chris, of course, the significance of this, of course, is that Lord Frost is a proper, as you would call them, red meat Brexiteer, a low-tax Conservative. There's a feeling his ilk were not so welcome in the party now. Is it drifting towards the One Nation Conservatives who are going to be standing? So can we expect then, with this revelation, do you think, Lord Frost to be allocated a seat soon and to be welcomed back into the flock?
He might do. It's complicated. He's a peer. He's Lord Frost. No peer has ever resigned from the House of Lords to become an MP. In 2014, the rules changed on that, so he can do so. He could quit the Lords and become a candidate for election to Parliament. He was called, of course, the Great Frost by Boris Johnson. So yet again, this idea of Boris Johnson in the background. Lord Frost is someone who devised and came up with Boris Johnson's Brexit deal, and I think that is the undercurrent behind this whole thing. Is it being driven by people who don't like Boris Johnson? That would be denied, of course, by Boris Johnson himself. But Mr Sunak, we spoke to him on the flight over, on the flight back here, off camera, but there are some images of the conversation we had. He made very clear he feels he is pumped up. He's ready to go. He fundamentally believes in a country where taxes should be cut. He said how he is enthusiastically getting stuck into this campaign. Another 40 days to go.
Well, Chris, the Prime Minister might be saying he's feeling pumped up, but there's no getting away from the fact that his candidates are deflating. 75 and counting now won't be standing at the next election, and that allows us, Chris, to meet that grim tally, of 1997. That record has now been set. Could that be a grim omen of a Tony Blair-style wipeout to come, perhaps?
It's certainly an omen for something. 75 was the record set in 1997. We're now going above that. Of course, all Tory MPs stand down for different reasons. We heard, of course, from Chris Heaton-Harris on Shopper's political podcast out today. He just thinks it's time to move on. He's in his late 50s and he wants to try and get on with his life with a new idea, new things to do. Greg Clark, of course, he's standing down. Sir John Redwood, definitely a low-tax Brexiteer. And also, I think rather sadly, Craig McKinley, also a low-tax Brexiteer and someone who lost his arms and his legs to sepsis, and GBNews was proud to present that documentary telling Craig McKinley's story only on Tuesday. He then was given a round of applause by everybody in the House of Commons. Journalists were in tears watching it. It was an extraordinary moment, and indeed the PM has said that Craig McKinley has told GBNews he has stood down because the sudden calling of the election right now, I mean, he's not really in a place to fight an election. He was planning, like we all were, for a November election, and that would have allowed time to get all his health better, stronger, and ready to work the 60 or 80 hours a week timetable he normally does. He can't do that, but the PM has paid, again, tribute to him to journalists on the flight over from Belfast, saying that in his dark days, the PM thinks of Craig McKinley and thinks, well, my problems aren't as bad as his. So, I mean, absolute credit to him. But overall, 75 MPs, Tory MPs, now standing down. Part of the reason why is the last elections in 2017, 2019 were not expected. They were surprise elections. This one was expected in 2024. So it's almost a comparison to 2015. It's been a long run, I think, for a lot of Tory MPs. And that's why you're seeing more stand down than in previous elections. But it's now matching a record that goes back to 1997 and that Tory wipeout.
OK, Chris, so thank you for that update. Live on the campaign trail with the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. We'll cross back to you for loads more throughout the rest of the show. Excellent stuff. Now, joined now by the former Sky political correspondent, Peter Spencer. Peter, welcome to the show. Always a delight, especially on a Friday. Can I ask you about Jeremy Corbyn? Let's get stuck into Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn has announced dramatically he's going to stand as an independent. And finally, Sir Keir Starmer's booted him out.